It's time for Windows Weekly. Paul Thurrott's here. Richard Campbell's here. We're going to talk about the implosion at Intel, rave reviews for the new chips from AMD. Paul's got some thoughts about the Copilot Plus PCs and Snapdragon. And it's the return of WordStar. I know you've been waiting for it. All that coming up next on Windows Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell, episode 893, recorded Wednesday, August 7th, 2024. The WordStar look. It's time for Windows Weekly, the show we cover the latest news from Microsoft. And joining me in the little tiny boxes to my left and right, Paul Thurrott from Thurrott.com. Do you feel cramped in your little tiny box?
I'm feeling boxed in today, Leo.
Nothing wrong with three-shot. Three-shot makes me happy.
And Richard Campbell? Yeah, we actually can do up to 8 if you want to invite some friends.
I'm on CNN.
From RunAs Radio. This is the new method. You might as well get used to it, kids, because there's no more old method after today. This is the last Windows Weekly from the Eastside Studios.
Bye,
here we go.
studio.
Up into the attic. I have taken, it's funny. I have, I don't know, a few awards. It's 8 or 9. And I was going to leave them here. And then slowly, one by one, I've go, well, I can't, like Steve Martin, the jerk. I can't, but all I need is this. Well, I need this. And then, so I've brought them all home. And now there's a shelf, which I always said I would never do of awards.
I don't think much of this kind of stuff myself, but my wife got a writing award a couple of years ago.
That's cool.
And I said, my daughter was like, oh, that's really, it's really impressive. I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's probably just a coincidence it came 8 or 9 years after I got one, but it's and then and I said,
so there's a little rivalry.
Do they make them? I was like, do they make them smaller now? My award is quite a bit bigger.
Yeah, I have an Emmy, but it's
I went and slept on the couch.
Emmy.
Yeah,
I have there's a regular Emmy, which is pretty massive with a big thing, and then I have a regional Emmy award, which is like
it's compact.
Sure.
I have the compact
with
Emmy.
the region.
Yeah. I even brought my Ziff Davis editors, or what was it? Publisher's Circle or Chairman's Circle.
Nice.
Back when it was when the chairman was I can't even remember his name now.
Ziff or Davis?
It wasn't. It was after Bill Ziff. I've forgotten his name, which is probably a blessing. I have a Tech TV award. These awards go back 30 years now.
Wow. Since I took over the company, I have given myself the Best Boss Award.
Best Boss Award. I have that mug.
Nice.
So that's good. I have the mug.
In the old days of the MVP program, one of the things you could do is you could request a letter from Microsoft to someone to say you're an MVP.
Aw.
So I send it to the same friend every year.
That's cute. Congratulations.
Just to let you know.
You're an MVP in our book.
Still an MVP.
Again, yeah.
I am feeling a little inadequate, though, because I have an R2-D2, but it's smaller than yours. I guess it's like the Emmy. Paul has the big R2, and I have the little R2.
My R2 is falling apart. I don't know if you can see it, but I have little parts.
Are those pieces
off the side.
from the R2?
It's gonna teeter over. I don't know.
No, this R2 unit needs a little work.
R2 in crisis.
Let's talk about Windows 11, because that's why people are here.
Mm-hmm.
We welcome all the club members and all the people watching on all 7, count them, 7 streams. There's Discord for the club members. There's youtube.com/twit/live for the YouTubers. There's twitch.tv/twit for people who like to watch on Amazon's money-losing Twitch streams. There's Kick, which is the new guy in town. He's like, no one knows him. He's sitting in the corner. We should make friends, but so far we haven't. There's LinkedIn for no apparent reason, but it is a Microsoft platform, so that's good.
Does it arrive in LinkedIn as like a sponsored message from someone?
Undoubtedly. I have no idea. I've never visited it. There's also Facebook, but my favorite, we're on the fascist platform, x.com. So now...
And we're going to sue people who don't watch us.
If you don't watch us, we're going to court
sued
over that, buddy.
It's going to be an antitrust suit too.
Isn't that hysterical? So, what is wrong with that man?
I don't know. What is this?
First, a year ago, he said, go F yourself to sponsors.
Yeah.
Now he's saying, wait a minute, hold on. Anyway, so 7 streams, pick the one you want. Watch. We have a unified chat. So if you're chatting in one of those platforms, I will see it. May not respond because I only have 2 hands. Welcome to all of you and especially to our Club Twit members. Now, the Week D mystery continues.
Dun, dun, dun.
I feel like this is the only reason I exist anymore, just to make sense of this nonsense. But just to kind of recap things, everybody knows about Patch Tuesday, second Tuesday of every month. Microsoft issues quality updates for Windows. Security updates are included these days, a lot of new features, et cetera, et cetera. They have an insider program for testing new features that they, ignore kind of willy-nilly, but whatever. They have various channels. And then, I don't know, I think it was sometime last year or so, they added a switch to Windows Update. So anybody using Windows 11 could opt into preview updates, which are delivered also once a month, but on the Tuesday of the 4th week of the month. This is the Week D update, as we call it. Right? Everyone with me so far?
Mm-hmm.
So, this past year, 2 years, has been kind of interesting on the Windows update front because Microsoft keeps changing the way that they update Windows, right? So there are different literal methods for updating Windows, but also just the schedule and how things are done and so forth. And so this year, I'm not going to remember all of them, but the big one is that 24H2, which historically or typically would be delivered in the second half of the year, was partially delivered in the first half of the year for people on Snapdragon X-based PCs, the Copilot Plus PCs. And there'll be a second release later in the year for everyone else. I provided a tip probably 2-3 months ago now where anyone could get this if they want. But for this little magical slice in time, we have 3 supported versions of Windows, all with roughly the same feature. The goal is for them to all have the same feature set. We've talked about this, right? Yep. What else am I missing? I'm missing all kinds of stuff, but we'll just talk our way through this. So a few weeks back, we had Patch Tuesday in July, and that got Windows 11, 22H2, and 23H2 roughly caught up to where 24H2 was. And then a couple of weeks ago, we had that Week D update, and the Tuesday came and went. We did Windows Weekly. I actually forgot about it. And then I think it was Thursday or Friday, Microsoft did a Week D update for Windows 11, 22, and 23H2 belatedly, right? A couple of days late. And that's been happening this year. This is probably the 3rd time that's happened. It didn't go out on the Tuesday, but it did go out. And okay. And you look at these updates and you see, okay, well, there's a couple of new things in there. Minor updates to the start menu, the taskbar. This is the duplicate tab thing in File Explorer that everyone is so excited to have. And those features are actually not in Windows 11 24H2, and there was no 24H2 Week D update. But coincidental to that, on the same day, Microsoft put a new build of Windows 11 24H2 into the release preview channel of the Windows update. The Windows Insider program. And the new features in that update map to the features we see in Week D for 22 and 23H2. So my theory at the time was August is going to come around next week. Let me look at the calendar to be sure. Yeah, next week is Patch Tuesday. And, maybe this was a little off. Maybe they intended for this to be the Week D update. They just, whatever, they ran out of time, whatever. There must be some release window, who knows? And this is going to be what would have been the Week D update. And so that was the story as of last Wednesday. And then Microsoft on August 2nd, which was probably Tuesday. Nope, it was Friday. Sorry. On August 2nd. Am I doing the wrong? Yeah. So they released a Week D update for Windows 11 in August. That was for July.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, in fact, the same stuff that was in that release preview build.
Okay.
And some other stuff, right? So this is a bunch of new features that we're probably all going to get next Tuesday, or start to get, because CFRs, right? Which is one of those other, new methods that Microsoft has for rolling out updates, right? They don't just blurt it out into the world at the same time. Like, the features come out randomly, essentially, right? So we're going to have things like the ability to drag pinned start menu app shortcuts down to the taskbar to pin them there. We're going to have the ability to duplicate tabs. We're going to have the ability, again, because this is a regression problem, to drag files up to the address bar in File Explorer and then move or copy them to a different location in the breadcrumb bar, like we used to be able to do. This is
Not
the
that I
4
ever
lock
did that,
screen
but-
widgets, all that stuff, right? There's a million new ways to use Windows Share.
Do you get a sense that like a bunch of people are on vacation, and so like the kids are just having a good time?
I have no sense. I have in fact, it is, if anything, nonsense, right? I mean, I don't, that's the thing. And honestly, that's been what, I mean, ever since Windows 11, it's been confusing and alarming. And I feel like this is parallel to you being on the show. I feel like one of the earliest things,
the whole update process.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a causal relationship, but it's interesting that, to my memory anyway, I seem to recall one of the earliest conversations we had was, hey, there are like 3 different versions of OneDrive now. Anyone know what's going on there? And to this day, they have never acknowledged that happened. It was like that for a year and a half or more. I mean, it was, and then this is when features just started appearing in Windows that were never tested.
And fragmentation is a constant problem with a company this big. Everybody has access to code bases and they take advantage of it.
Yep. There's kind of a bigger topic here in a way that has to do with Microsoft and the markets it does well in and doesn't do well in. And the thing that's so weird about this is not what its primary and most important customers want at all. No. It's not what almost any customers want, but I could sort of excuse behavior that ignored consumers to some degree because maybe they're not as important to Microsoft. I would get that, but
or at least they don't understand it. It's funny because I just put a Windows Server show in the can for RunAs, which is a good, 6 weeks away or something.
Okay.
And
who'd you talk to, by the way? Do you mind if you
don't? It was Oren Thomas.
Okay, nice.
Right, only guy I know who's written more books than you.
Yeah. Yep.
It's like he's clearly not learning. But one of the
he's teaching other people too.
How much money Server makes. Like those servers aren't going away.
Yeah. This isn't like the return of vinyl. Right.
No,
it's not like, we're not all going back to buying CDs in stores and not using Spotify or whatever. But for Microsoft, because of the marketing, or maybe marketing's the wrong word, but it's almost like a fiduciary need to market Azure during those many years where it was like 70% growth, 70% growth, 70% growth. This is what drove Microsoft's market cap up with its share price, right? Was this Wall Street excitement over the cloud. And they didn't talk about it a lot. Of course, they very purposefully obscure their financials so they don't have any specifics. But yeah, I mean, Azure was growing, but it's very likely that for a lot of that time, Server was the bigger business.
It was making
right?
money, because this stuff's not going away. And it was to me, it was very gratifying to spend time with Oren talking about Server and Active Directory and like the thing
it's like
virtually every listener to RunAs has.
For IT, this is like my excitement over WPF. It's like, it's back, baby.
Yeah.
It never went away.
Really went away, but it's
point.
back in the context again. And it never stopped being important. It never left anyone's budget. It's always been there.
I'm not claiming this is purposeful, but I think it might be. That Microsoft all of a sudden is talking about Server again at a time when Azure growth has not leveled off, but has slowed dramatically. And now talking about Server wouldn't have a negative impact on analysts watching the company for growth, right? They've been kind of worried about Azure for a while now, frankly, and now we have got AI. Oh, look over here, another new thing we can wave our hands at.
Well, I think we have this terrible conflict of interest where they want to move the stock price more than they want to serve their customers.
Yes, it's the enterprise and certification.
In fact, because it makes all that leadership has an awful lot of stock,
Yeah.
And, you know, in theory,
right.
they have a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. That's what the Harvard Business School keeps telling them.
Right.
You know, and then even when you get down to the employee level, if your leadership is banging on about Azure, your best promotion path is focusing on Azure. So it doesn't matter what you're good at, what makes money.
Oh, listen,
you know, they're in the trap.
I lived this nightmare because the topics, the products that I care about at Microsoft the most are client products, right? They're what we might think of as consumer products, but they're really not really, right? But just client products. The entire company had a pivot on the cloud, and the way that happened in Windows as a client was Windows as a service. Let's take this spaghetti code of legacy, you know, infrastructure, client infrastructure, and we'll pretend it's an online service, and we'll just update it all the time. And it was really, really bad for a really, really long period of time. Terry Myerson's pay package or his bonuses were based on that kind of growth that he was never going to achieve. They cooked the books. They were counting VM installs. Remember, they were trying to get to 1 billion installs of Windows 10 at one point in some really fast period of time. And the irony or the weird coincidence, I guess, of all this is that honestly today they got really good at updating Windows. you know? Maybe a little too good, because now they just, I guess anyone with a desk can pull a switch and something goes out to Windows now. I don't know what's happening, but so hopefully as I see Microsoft starting to stopping to pretend that Windows Server isn't a thing, when the Jeff Woolseys of the world, who never went away, are suddenly back, you know, in public again talking. I love that because
although when I did the show on the next version of Server, he wasn't allowed to say Server 2025. He had to say Server V next.
Well, it was probably just the timing of you don't want to, well, you know, what if they missed I don't know. I hear you.
If you miss 2025, you really missed something like that. Yeah, that's true. Well,
so yeah, this is where we're at. Right. And so we just don't, like I said, it doesn't make sense to me that Microsoft does things so erratically and chaotically because its primary customers, and it's probably a higher percentage now than it's ever been. But the historic number we've always used is, you know, 2/3 of Windows from a revenue perspective comes from commercial, not from consumer. Right.
Yeah.
But my God, there's been a lot of focus on, you know, Copilot plus PC, local AI.
Yeah. But that's not happening on the server side. On the server side, incremental improvements. Because what do you want from a server but reliability?
Have they added Copilot to the Windows Server desktop yet?
Why no? No, they have not. In fact, they're doing their very best to get rid of the desktop entirely, right? They don't want you to RDP into those servers anymore. They don't think you should have a GUI there anymore.
Yep. Sure. Yeah. We're all
they're not wrong.
Well, I mean, I think one of the hot new tips of 2025 is going to be the same as it was in 2005, which is how you can get a copy of Windows Server and make it run like a Windows client, you know, just so you can get escape from all the terribleness that's happening.
Yeah, no, I did that at one point. I had one of my P4 laptops, you know, the one you could cook food on, that I ran a server edition of, I think 2000. I think it was 2003.
No, we all tried this at one point. I mean,
just something to leave me alone. So I have stuff to do.
God forbid.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry for the distraction.
It all ties in together. I mean, it's honestly, those two things parallel each other, right? So
totally.
Windows was the thing that didn't fit. It was the square peg and everything else was round holes. It just didn't make sense in Microsoft. Still doesn't, right?
No. But
server.
It's never stopped making money.
Yeah. Well, the parallel there is Apple IIe in the 80s was the thing making all the money for Apple, but they were selling the Mac. Yeah. You know, they kind of wanted it to go away. The difference there is that transition was always going to happen with the server. And this is true on the client to a little small degree, but the server, especially because of the, you know, the nature of the cloud and infrastructure and so forth. I mean, it was never going to go away.
No.
The question was what the plateau was. And I think it ended up
because over on the .NET world,
higher than they thought. You know?
We deploy .NET code to Linux instances now because it saves us 25% right off the bat.
Yeah, nice.
Right.
Hopefully they're running on Azure, but that's fine.
That's where they're running. But you can run them elsewhere. They run fine on GCP and they run fine on AWS as well. But why?
Right.
And if you've got IIS chops, app service seems very familiar, right? Like it's not hard to get around in there. You'll recognize it.
Right.
But on the client side, changing clients is hard. You know, and folks. We
were joking before the show about the difficulty of going from a Mac keyboard to a Windows keyboard and back again, and that's just the smallest little corner of that.
Well, and I'm wearing my RunAs hat here. It's about administering them, right? It's about controlling images and controlling driver sets and common hardware sets and all of those. I am responsible for X many thousand desktops, and by golly, I know how to do that in Windows. And it's not the same with a Mac.
I have to think that Microsoft's strategy, pushing out that 23H2 as, just a monthly update for 22H2, just kidding, that kind of thing, is part of a broader plan just to beat down IT and just hope that some of them just give in. Right?
I mean, what are they doing effectively? But it's like, you can have any update you want because they're all the same.
Exactly. Which version of Windows do you want to be on? 22H2? Sure, you can have that. You can have all the new features, but you're on 22H2. You win.
I'll keep that name there if we made that happy.
Concession.
That's it.
Yeah, exactly. But
it's the same.
It is. It is beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful and sad, but
twisted, man. This is Orwellian. It's unbelievable.
I know. That's why, when you said something about making sense of something early on, I'm like, there's no sense to be made here. It is just a coping strategy and just some form of submission. It's
brilliant. Also, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, I'm going to get you to use this feature. I'm just going to tell you whatever you need to hear.
Yep. It's easy to be cynical. Period. It's super easy to be cynical with big tech, Microsoft in particular. But it's hard not to look at their behavior sometimes and think, antitrust regulators, they have started looking at Microsoft too, but they're really starting to pay attention to like Apple, Google,
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into that later today.
They're like, and they're like, when the ISR is looking the other direction, maybe we could scurry around in here and do what we want and see what happens,
Hey, you know what? I'm more than ever, and you made this very clear to me, the Brad Smith strategy works.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Those folks are looking for talking points to get them reelected, and you don't give them. It's like, we're happy to comply. Let's go. Now, it doesn't mean whether they are or not, but they say the thing that leaves no talking points, so it doesn't make the news.
We don't know what happened with Teams bundling in the EU exactly. I'm sure it will come out someday, but that's the one weird exception where Microsoft offered concessions, then they just did it. They didn't wait for the EU to agree. They said, okay, we're gonna unbundle it. We're gonna do the right thing. You're like, wow, this company's really changed. And then the EU's like, nope. You're like, what happened? They're like, do you just have to do something different? Could you give us any guidance? No, we cannot.
No, but what you did was wrong.
Yeah, it was just wrong. We didn't like it. So now the EU is acting like a chat. So I don't.
Yeah. Well, and I think again, that's the Windows N was like that.
Yes. Yes.
Your effort to protect customers has now hurt customers. What would you like us to do next?
In the late 90s and early 2000s, because of what happened to Microsoft with the U.S. government, a lot of me and other people like me and you, I'm sure we all had to learn about antitrust. We had to sort of understand what was happening. Yeah. And so we're going to apply this knowledge later in the show because, Google had this big event this past week that parallels what happened to Microsoft 20 plus years ago. And really parallels, like it's crazy. Like it's
shockingly,
it's explicitly paralleling it. And, I think we all have our own memories of that time. I cannot tell you how strong the belief is out there that Microsoft won that case, that they settled and they got everything they wanted. And it's like, ooh, we're going to look at that a little bit, but that's not true. But that is not true at all. But
no. Basically Steve Ballmer got his job and made his job the first year he had that job when he successfully negotiated the consent decree.
A compliance officer, basically.
But he spent a year making it come true.
The victory for Microsoft was that the breakup order was taken off the table.
Yeah.
So that was the big thing. But I think the important point to know from back then is that the guilty verdict and the findings of fact, those were not taken away. Those were all legal precedent. Those are all.
Oh no, you were these things, but you're now complying in a way that allows us to not have to enforce a remedy.
Now that we're 25 years later, hard to believe. What if Microsoft were broken up? Dvorak's contention was that would have been a good thing.
How many hours you have?
Shareholders and everybody else, right?
So the two the two big what ifs of that era to me are that, right? Like, what would two Microsofts look like? An app
Would it have
company
been
and an apps
bad?
company?
Yeah.
You would have seen, Office. By the time Windows 8 was coming out, Office had already created Office for the iPad, and Steve Ballmer said, "No, we're not putting it out."
Right.
The Office of that era, 15 years earlier, whatever that is, would have put it on Linux, would have put it on the web faster, would have, done a cross-platform thing that the integrated Microsoft of the early 2000s would never have done. The Windows-focused Microsoft, right? That's probably the big one. Would it have been successful? Is no one, who cares? I mean, in some ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the bigger one to me is, what would the 2000s and 2010s have been like if Microsoft was like it was in the 90s? Companies like Google, Amazon, the resurgent Apple to some degree, and Facebook would never have happened.
No.
If Microsoft could have Netscaped those guys, which they would have, our world would look like East Germany today. It would be, it would be horrible.
Oh, no, it would be just be Bingish. It would be.
We talked yesterday. It's also the 27th anniversary of Bill Gates looming over Steve Jobs, announcing that they were going to give Apple $150 million, without which Apple would not have survived, literally.
That's right.
And it's, I think, likely, although there's some debate over this, that the reason Microsoft did that was because of looming regulatory action from the DOJ.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very recently, I read somewhere, I put this aside, so I'll be able to tell you where it was eventually, but someone had a story where supposedly Steve Jobs went to Gates and said, "Hey, we've all that lawsuit stuff around look and feel and intellectual property, we could make this go away, but just so you know, like, we actually have more. And if you guys don't agree to help us out, like, we're going to launch another lawsuit against you." And supposedly that played a role. I've never heard that before in my life. So this just came up recently. I was like, I don't know about that one, but and there were, we'll talk about Google later, but there were parallels between that and Microsoft and Apple, and today with Google and Mozilla, right? That if Google stopped paying Mozilla, that company would probably disappear in about 2 seconds. It's some 90-something% of their operating revenue or cash flow or whatever it is every year comes from Google, right? They pay them I think it's $500-something million a year or whatever it is. So yeah, there's a lot of parallels. I'm not sure how we got off on antitrust there, but anyway, but to Richard's point earlier, yes, the now that Microsoft has kind of just through natural business evolution, Azure slowed down. It's still, now it's a real business doing great, right? The focus is elsewhere, and I think Windows Server can come out from the shadows again and say, "Yeah, remember us? We're still here," and they'll never admit to it, but I bet that's a huge percentage of intelligent cloud, a huge percentage, way more than people would imagine, because they've incessantly marketed the cloud, right? Just like Windows is. I mean, we don't know the exact number, but it's probably 8 to 10 billion a quarter right out of Windows client, right? Consistent forever. It's just like an enduring cash machine, but it's treated so horribly by this company. And I think it's because the upper level executives have their eye on a different prize these days, right? Which now is AI. Okay. Windows 7, okay. So in the past week, not much going on with the Windows Insider program. There was a very small build last week in the beta channel, an equally small build to dev. But today, they put out something very interesting. And it's hard not to believe that this wasn't purposely timed, because I just updated this chapter in the book, but they're issuing a major update to the Windows Store app that will eventually, it's not public, but it's in the Canary and dev channels. Yeah. Kind of they probably would call it the third major redesign of the library part of that app. And they're separating out updates and downloads from there, which honestly is probably overdue. That was kind of a mishmash, or it is today. If you go look at it today, it's actually very confusing. And they've changed it over time so that, in fact, I'm just going to bring it up so I can speak to this more intelligently. But if you go into library today in the window, the Microsoft Store app, what you'll see is a library, but the default view is, things you might need to update at the top, but the library view itself is actually apps that are installed on your computer right now I sort of think of this, I'm not really sure why anyone would need that view, honestly. The default view in the beginning was your actual library, right? So if you go in there and click the little sort button over on the right, and you unclick show installed products only, what you'll see is a list of all of the apps and games that you've ever purchased or downloaded through the Microsoft Store, including, by the way, on Xbox and elsewhere. Although there might even be Windows Phone stuff in here, although they might be finally filtering that out by now. But some of that stuff you can't actually do anything with if it's from for a different platform. And I use this to go in there and find the handful of like expensive apps that I've purchased, like Affinity Photo or Adobe Photoshop Elements, so that I can reinstall them quickly, right? Because in this case, they both begin with the letter A and they're both right next to each other. So it's kind of easy. I can just go click and kind of install it. So they're going to separate these two functions out so that updates and downloads will be its own view, and then library will be its own view, which frankly is I think it's what it was some time ago, but it's what it should be. And it will be coming back or at least changing in that direction. And then some other stuff that's not super interesting about, special deals and things that will pop up from here and there. But this is kind of a not structural, but it's a good update, because like I said, I just updated the chapter in the book, and as I wrote, this is what this is. It was like, man, this doesn't make any sense. Like this interface actually does not make any sense. So they're going to fix it. So that's good. And based on the fact that it's in Canary and Dev, I will probably have it in stable tomorrow or Friday, because we don't know when things come out. That's the point. Right?
All I know is they come out after you talk about them on the show.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, did Thurrott update his book? Yeah. Okay. Ship it. Yep.
Yeah. Great. And make sure you change all the graphics while you're at it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the one thing I looked at was if these people, and when I talk like that, it's getting bad, but if they updated that nav bar, so I literally have to change every single screenshot in this chapter, I'm going to lose my brain. And there's a change. So fantastic, because that's what they do.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, let's see. So when did we have this discussion? Sometime in the past few weeks, we would have talked about this notion, and this is before, we're going to later in the show, we'll talk about Intel's financials and all the bad stuff happening there. But, Microsoft and its partners shipped these Copilot Plus PCs, right? Running Qualcomm's Snapdragon X processor, very efficient, much better battery life, very good, not perfect, but very good compatibility, seems to solve a problem, but we have to be measured here, right? Obviously, we knew and know now even more that AMD and Intel are going to, or have now in one case, shipped some of their next gen chips. And part of the design of these chips is to address some of their shortcomings compared to ARM, right?
Sure.
But you also get this kind of knee-jerk reaction on the other side where it's like, oh my God, Intel's screwed. x86 is over. And it's like, guys.
Easy there, Jax.
Settle down. But the thing is, it's not just, maybe we should call it x64, but x86, x64, right? The Intel architecture. That's not necessarily the primary target, although obviously we want that to improve as well, right? And I don't, in the same sense that Windows Server is probably never really going to go away, x64 is not really going to go away. And honestly, in the Windows world, it's probably going to be dominant for the foreseeable future. I don't really see that changing. But we had people writing stories like Intel's doomed. They don't address this right now. That if they don't do so, they have to pull a Hail Mary here. And it's like, guys, Intel's running into a lot of problems right now, literally because they've been pulling Hail Marys for the past 3-4 years in a row.
Yeah.
Like they've
actually got to stop throwing the long ball. Right?
Yeah, for Intel, they've been actually moving pretty aggressively. Like one might say too aggressively. We'll get to that, but we know the AMD mobile chips are out now. The AMD desktop chips are going to be out in the middle of the month, so about a week from now. Intel's on track to ship Lunar Lake, which is the mobile version of their next gen Core Ultra chips, in early September. IFA. This is a great time to be alive if you love hardware. But the other target, and honestly, kind of the explicit target, is Apple and the Mac, right? And the Apple Silicon chips. Microsoft made it very obvious that the MacBook Air was a target, if not the target, at the Copilot Plus launch, right? I mean, they mentioned MacBook Air again and again, and that's not a surprise. I mean, back in, I think it was February or March or whenever, I purchased a MacBook Air M3 ahead of getting any of these Snapdragon PCs. Not because I need to reacquaint myself with the Mac or the software, whatever, but just because I wanted to experience over a long period of time, like, what are the real advantages to this thing?
Mm-hmm.
And there are very real advantages to it. Snapdragon X has made major inroads into battery life and what I'll call efficiency, that instant on stuff.
Yep.
It's still better on the Mac. And I don't know this for a fact, but I suspect I could put my MacBook Air over here on the bed, go away for a month, come back, lift the lid, and it would just come on. It's that good.
Yeah.
If that sounds like an exaggeration, I hear you, but almost not.
But you're delighted with the Snapdragon, the fact that you can open it each day and it just comes on.
Yeah. So the thing, there is a time period at which that stops happening, right? I don't know what it is. It's probably
so
a
you've had this
week-ish.
happen to you now.
It's happened to me twice.
Right.
And in both cases, it was a machine I had reviewed and put aside. And I'm, of course I have to move on to other things.
Mm-hmm.
And I opened, the first time it happened, I was like, like what's happening
So
here?
it sat for a week or two?
It was at least a week. Yeah. It was at least a week. So
now you open
that's
it
something.
And it's not the battery's dead. It's dead.
Nope, the battery's fine. But yeah, look, we all know, or we have some vague idea that there are power management states in Windows and that there are different configurations where it goes into kind of a light sleep, if you will, when you first close the lid, because you may just come back and want to open it up and
be right
you want
there,
that to happen quick.
But at
But
some
if you leave
point,
it sitting there,
do you think this conserved battery, it just actually goes cold after a few days?
Yes, because this is minor, but it's real. With a Mac, when you close, at least the MacBook Air, when you close the lid, like the battery doesn't actually go down over time, which feels impossible. I mean, it must, right? Like it must go down by micro amounts. But if you had 100% battery, closed the lid, went to bed, woke up the next morning and lifted the lid, it is 100% battery. Like it's magical. I mean, maybe it's lying. I don't know, but it's amazing. A Snapdragon will lose 1 to 3% every night.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible that, maybe after a week, it's like, you've had a period of inactivity here. We can stop whatever its version, whatever the battery standby hibernation is. It will do that. I don't know. So that's something I kind of want to look into, but it's hard to test because you need to experience it over a long period of time, and you can't just do it once. I can't just say, hey, I did it. I know what it is now. So I'm looking at it, but it's going to be a while. Yeah. Still better than x86, right?
Sure.
At this point, anything's better than x86.
Well, I happen to be with you on that. But
we have at least one staff member who has an i9. I think Benito has an i9, the 13th generation. That's frying, and
he's got the bug.
Know. Yeah, I don't know. Well, he says everything's okay so far, but wouldn't you be nervous?
Yep, I would be. We're going to get to this.
It'll affect everything you do.
We're going to
let's hold off and do the AMD Intel story in just a bit, so I can take a break when you're done with the Snapdragon. Story.
I just wanted to finish up the Mac bit of it because especially I think in the Windows world, people either ignore it or don't know about it, and I am exposed to people who are like openly hostile to Apple.
Mm-hmm.
I say this a lot. I really do prefer Windows to Mac OS. I think this is for all of the problems we just described some of them in Windows 11. I very much still prefer Windows to the Mac, but the Mac has a true full screen mode that Windows lacks. It has incredible touchpad gestures that work all the time and are awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I've had weird issues with like the laptop, Surface laptop mouse cursor, which I explained that survived a reset, still a problem. But the thing, I think the thing that puts Apple over the top for consumers, for individuals, right, is not necessarily, it's not like the Mac or Mac apps or Mac, OS or whatever. It's the hardware design, which it's thinner, lighter, et cetera. It's that machine is also unbearably magically like light and thin for its size. It's kind of crazy. It's the ecosystem, right? It's the broader ecosystem. Like, I think that most people using a Mac today are probably there because they started using an iPhone and they had such a really good experience. They started halo affecting their way through the ecosystem.
And that's the sort of question is like, you may like Windows over Mac, but do you like iPhone over Android?
Yeah. So on that one, I'm actually mixed. I like both of them quite a bit. I I've actually been using an iPhone this year a lot, and I just did this morning. I picked up the Pixel. I'm going to update, when the new Pixels come out, and this thing is like thinner and lighter, and there are parts of the system that I really, really appreciate that they don't have on the Apple side. There's things on the Apple side I really appreciate, like AirPlay, which lets me use Sonos without having to deal with Sonos, which is a huge advantage because Sonos is terrible.
Sonos really broke their app, but I've been using Spotify.
That's not. I'm in such pain.
That is, it's inexcusable. Like it's awful.
Terrible company. There's a company that should go down with Intel, to be honest. But okay.
But the thing is, and this is the thing that will pain people because Microsoft can never get there with this stuff. It's the cross-device integration stuff that is so amazing and so impossible to do seamlessly on Windows. It's just we're never going to get there, and so you as an individual have to decide for yourself if it matters.
The so-called ecosystem play. You mean?
Yeah, I can copy to the clipboard on an iPhone and paste on the Mac.
Continuity, so great.
I used this example before, but at a Qualcomm event in New York back in I think April, I wanted to get a photo I'd taken on the phone into the Mac, and I was like, could I? And I went into the camera app, copied it to the clipboard, pasted it into my notes on the Mac, and I was like, okay, this thing is magical. Now, obviously, Microsoft's working on stuff like this, right? We talked about file system integration over wireless last week and File Explorer, et cetera, with Android. But, if you have an iPad, which a lot of these guys do, right? They're kind of buying in. This thing becomes a second display for your Mac instantaneously. If you want it to be a wireless display with multi-touch and Apple Pencil compatibility, yep, you can do that too. Send and receive text messages back and forth between all your devices. Don't have to have your phone with you at the time.
Kevin, hold on. You don't need to show the Apple page when we talk about Apple.
It's not an ad
this
for
is
Apple.
Windows Weekly. I think probably let's not offend anyone here.
This is my it's 2024. I have been writing about Microsoft and Windows for 30 years this year. And if there's anything that I do that's maybe a little different than most of the people who do what I do, it's that I've spent a lot of those 30 years looking at all of the alternatives over time, again and again and again. And I think you have to be, and that means, I've probably had 15 Macs since 2001. I probably own more Apple hardware than most Apple fans. I've had almost every iPad, almost every iPhone, almost every iPod, almost every, not every Mac, but many Macs. And I got to tell you, you may not want it. You may not like them. I get that. I respect it. But you need to understand there's a bridge we're never going to cross on this side of the fence because we just don't have that ability. So what we have are, I don't want to call them half-assed, it's unfair, but we're always going to have these things that aren't going to work as well or reliable that will do some of the things I just described, right? If you have a high-end Samsung phone and you can get it to work with Phone Link, you could have instant on hotspot capabilities in Windows. But you know what? If you have a Mac, you just get it. It's just there all the time, that kind of thing. So
the new, on Sequoia, the new Phone Link with the iPhone is basically doing what Microsoft's doing with Phone Link, but it works and it's really nice. And
that's so what. So I've been paying attention to this beta stuff they're doing now. I have to say the ability to have a remote screen of your phone on your PC is actually not very interesting to me. And it's only if your phone is distant. Like most people, I would guess, have their phone nearby all the time. Yeah.
So if you get a notification or whatever, you've got it on your phone. But if Jason Snell, for some reason, he keeps his phone in the house while he's doing the shows, so he likes it because he's got his phone on the screen of his computer. Can I say something though? Because I really think, despite all that, it's merely a matter of personal preference. I think the difference between Windows, Mac, and Linux is just pure. Well, there are pros and cons, but it's purely personal.
The inspiration for this conversation was that you guys know the Snapdragon stuff is awesome. Like they did it. I say this after the last decade of seriously, are they ever going to get there? And it is amazing. But there are people now, we're kind of doing this victory dance, and it's like, guys, it's not over. We have there's way more to do. And, we'll see what happens going forward. The Microsoft experience works like this. We have Phone Link, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. If you have a high-end Samsung phone or a handful of other phones, you get additional features. that everyone else doesn't get. So there's this kind of bifurcated experience that doesn't make any sense. The remote phone display thing we were just talking about, if you have that high-end Samsung Ultra, whatever, you get that. That's cool. And you even get a feature I don't think is on the Apple side, which is actually very cool if you like this kind of thing, which is you can run individual apps in their own windows off the phone on your computer. You can pin them. You can have them be there like apps, like alongside your other computers. It's not just a view of the phone. I don't think Apple's doing that. Maybe they do that in iOS 19 or whatever. I don't care. But and it's so you could check that one off and say, look, see, we're doing something Apple doesn't do. And it's like, yeah, for now, and only on certain phones, and that's, if you accept those limitations, or you just don't care, or you don't like Apple anyway, so you're not using an iPhone, so who cares? Yeah, you're fine. Right. So in the United States, that's less than 50% of people now, I guess. But in the world, it's probably 75, 80. Yeah. I don't know what the percentage.
I think it's because of price more than anything else, right?
Well, it's price and this choice, right? You get the choice of hardware, choice of
there are Android
these
phones
days
are the same price.
That's true, but I think that's why Android's dominant worldwide is not the top tier phones.
No, yeah, you're right.
It's the $50
same reason that Windows is dominant in the PC space. Yep.
Yeah. It's price.
Yep.
I wonder
but also
if
choice,
everything.
Right? I mean, but you have that choice. I mean, you can have a premium Android experience.
Yeah.
If you like Samsung for some reason, or maybe Pixel, you might consider to be in there.
Pixel's more the bare bones.
But I honestly, Android phones aren't as diverse as you might think. I mean, they're all right. It's all basically the same. Yeah. There's some hardware difference. When you pay $1,000 or more, you get a better camera and a better screen.
The bigger thing that happens with Android phones is that the carriers hijack them.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Well, you don't want to get it from Verizon.
Or any carrier. Every carrier loads
Rogers, right.
I understand. Between Android and Windows are so obvious. It's just like, back in the day, and not back in the day, today, one of the big complaints about PCs is the junk the PC makers put on there.
Yep.
Windows will have a set of features that are built into the operating system, and HP, Lenovo, Dell, whatever, will put features in themselves that duplicate stuff that's already in Windows, but bypasses it, just like Samsung does or Verizon does or whatever with Android. And it's like, guys, seriously. But they're not, they have different competitive aims, right, than the platform maker or the customer, I guess, or whatever. So anyway, we have the choice. We definitely have the choice.
Choice is great. And I guess from Apple's point of view, at least when they're talking to the Department of Justice, the choice is Apple or something else. There's no choice within the Apple ecosystem. That's a tough one. I mean, if you the Apple stuff is actually similar in some ways to the Microsoft antitrust stuff as well, in the sense that they are artificially restricting what competitors can do on their platform, and even something as simple as there's a 15% fee for a music service that we don't charge for our own music service. Like, it's like, guys, like what do you, come on, those types of things. Or messaging apps, they can't do everything their messaging app can do because Apple artificially restricts that, or the Safari, core at the bottom of every browser, et cetera, et cetera. That stuff to me is hard to defend. But that's the DOJ didn't get everything right. I mean, they sort of suggested like Apple should make Apple Watch compatible with Android. And it's like, guys, that has nothing to do with their iPhone monopoly. Yeah. Like that's ridiculous. So it's not 100% straightforward, but it's so funny because I am now saying things that are pro Windows, but people are still saying, "Oh, Leo's so pro Apple."
Leo, you have this. You can't. You don't win. I can't win. There's no win for you because on this show, you'll be like, "Oh, you should see him on the Mac show. He's just on Microsoft."
I'm just saying it's personal preference. It's the only difference. Honestly, that and price. Please,
I'm waiting for someone to be in the thing now and say, "Well, if you like Apple so much, why don't you start the Apple Super site?" It's like, guys, that's not the point. I'm just saying you have to recognize
here's the good news.
The competition is doing.
There's cross-pollination now between all platforms. So just as you said, no matter what feature you want on the other platform, be patient because it'll
if it's really a good idea, it'll propagate everywhere.
Exactly.
Tribalism is not that smart. Like, we're kind of past that.
Yeah. Now. It's silly to be tribal. That really is my real point.
I wish we were past it, but
yeah. No, my real point is guys, it's just your personal preference. It's not one's better than the other. It's personal preference. That's
I'd like you to briefly imagine, I know this is horrifying, so bear with me, like how horrible it would be to be married to me. And what I mean by that is, I get up in the morning and I read the comments on my
I
site.
think about that all the time.
I know, you should. Never. And I had written the article that was the thing we were just talking about, what that was based on. And the reason I wrote it is because there is serious tribalism, especially in my little community. And I wanted to get, on top of this. I didn't want people to get ahead of themselves. Yes, the Snapdragon X is a huge step forward. We're not done. It's not over. And I had some people in mind when I wrote this. Like I know because these people, they're very tribal. And this morning when I cracked open my laptop, by the way, screen came right on. Love Snapdragon X. Some of those people were in there saying like I laughed out loud when you said that the Apple ecosystem was better than the Microsoft ecosystem. We have a much better apps on Windows, and it's like, yeah, I was talking about the broader ecosystem, meaning not just the computer. And there is nothing on the Microsoft side. We just have these half-assed integrations we try to do in Phone Link and wherever else. Like we just have the cobbled together thing that we've always had in Windows, and that was kind of my point. So anyway, yes. So you can stop thinking about that little relationship. But sorry.
All right, let's take a break because we do want to hammer on Intel. I mean, I'm sorry. What I meant was this morning as I'm reading this, my wife is sitting next to me trying to read the news, and I'm over on my laptop going about because people are not paying attention. Anyway, sorry. I try to avoid the news early in the morning. I don't want to be angry until noon. I have more energy in the morning. I want to get it out of the way.
I get it.
Like in the afternoon, I would just be like, eh.
It's funny. I wake up cheerful. My wife is the other way. So it would be like being married to you, I guess.
Yeah.
I wake up like Cinderella, or sleep, going, it's talking to the birds.
Yeah. See,
anyway.
I don't, it's like, how did you sleep? It's like, I made some mistakes. I didn't do good. I'm going to work on it tonight.
Didn't go well at all.
I don't have high hopes.
I love it. All right, let's take a little time out for our sponsor and get back to more with Grumpy Paul and Rich. You're kind of I feel like you might wake up happy.
I wake up happy, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So it's
infuriating.
No, I wake up ready to write, like head going 100 miles an hour. Like,
I'm excited for the day. I got ideas. I got things to do.
Actually, by the way, I do have that to some degree.
He wakes up cynical, I think is what it is.
Loquacious in our YouTube chat says, I wake up like Sleepy Beauty. I need a kiss.
Wow. Well, let's see a picture.
Our show today brought to you by 1Password. I'm really excited about this. We've been talking about Collide for a long time, and we mentioned a few months ago that 1Password had just acquired Collide, and the fruit of this union has emerged. I got a question. Do your end users, are they good people? They always work on company-owned devices using IT-approved apps? No, of course not. What, are you crazy? So how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps, all those BYOD devices? 1Password has an answer to this question. Extended Access Management is the first security solution that brings all those unmanaged devices and apps and identities under your control. It ensures that every user credential is strong and protected. Every device is known and healthy, and every app is visible. And it solves these problems in a way that traditional IAM and MDM just cannot touch. That's why it's EAM. Imagine your company's security like the quadrangle at your college campus, the ivy covered halls, the beautiful brick paths between the buildings. Those are the company-owned devices, the IT-approved apps, the managed employee identities. It's all nice and groomed and safe, except as you know, with every college quad, there are the paths people actually use, the shortcuts through the grass. They're actually the straightest line from Hall A to Classroom B. And unfortunately, that's where your troubles begin, right? Those are the unmanaged devices, the shadow IT apps, the non-employee identities, like contractors. And most security tools really only work on those happy brick paths. But where do your troubles begin? Where do those security problems happen? On the shortcuts, on the dirt paths. That's why you need 1Password extended access management. It's security for the way we work today. Available now to companies with Okta, but good news, very good news, coming later this year to Google Workspace and Microsoft Entra. You might want to check this out now. Go to 1password.com/Windows Weekly, the number 1password.com/Windows Weekly. It's not IAM, it's EAM, Extended Access Management. And it's a really great product from 1password.com/Windows Weekly. We thank them so much for their support of Windows Weekly. Let's get to the chips. We talked about Snapdragon, but it is, it's a three-headed race right now. You got Snapdragon, you've got Intel, and you've got AMD, right? Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, really what we have is Intel, and then I guess there are these other companies.
Sometimes.
And it's weird to me that AMD has not gotten more traction, although I think I touched on this last week or the week before. Intel spends a lot of money to, keep their position in the market, right? So I'm on the kind of other end of the funnel. I get these opportunities to review laptops, and it's more than 9 out of 10 are running Intel chips. That's been like that for a long time. But my experience with AMD has always been very positive. So I have high hopes, and we've seen the first reviews of the mobile version of this new generation of processor from AMD, and it looks like that's going great. Intel has started talking about Lunar Lake a little bit more, and we're going to learn a lot more in September. So everything's going great, except it's not. So this has been a big week or 10 days of earnings. We're going to talk a little bit more about earnings later, but we'll do Intel's now because unfortunately, Intel has been suffering, I would say, for a couple of years now with, a PC market that's been down and a very slow and expensive transition to this future that their CEO envisions, where they kind of seize on and leverage their historic strength in manufacturing, take advantage of some subsidies that we're getting from the U.S. government because it's a national security concern.
Yes.
And manufacture chips at home here in the United States, right? Mm-hmm. So, and elsewhere.
But not that they've ever stopped manufacturing chips in the U.S.
But that volume and for others, right?
Yes.
And the idea here,
specifically the extreme ultraviolet stuff.
Yeah. It's complicated and expensive, and it's going slow. So I unfortunately, from my perspective, because I have to write this up every quarter, I feel like we're in an endless loop of underperforming. It's going to get better. We're so close. We're hitting this milestone soon. We're doing that, and it's like, have we actually done anything here? Is Intel still using 14 nanometer chips, or is that just my imagination? I mean, it feels
they
like
are, but they also make other ones too.
Yeah. So, oddly enough, I mean, this last quarter, the part of Intel that makes PC chips experienced a 9% gain on revenue, $7.4 billion. The rest of the company, not as good, but it's just, this is not going well. So they announced as part of their earnings that they're going to lay off approximately 15% of their workforce, which is approximately 15,000 people. Wow. They're going to restructure again. They're going to reduce the number of products that they produce. They're going to stop all non-essential work. They're going to reduce capital expenditures, which is, is the term we use to describe, I call it building out AI infrastructure at Microsoft, but this is the building for the future bit, a CapEx. And their goal is to reduce costs by $10 billion.
The issue here is when you're building fabs take 10 years to build, right? And you're supposed to report quarterly on this. Like, that's just tough business. The problem is you got this confluence of, in my mind, three things, right? Mm-hmm. It's this they are struggling to make the newer chips and are having problems around all of that. The Snapdragon came out with a big old splash. Like everybody's real happy about that.
Yeah.
And then problems with the 13th gen.
Yeah. That one's interesting to me because there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the problems they're having with these chips aren't necessarily any worse than problems they've had with other chips
any other
over
chip.
time.
Yeah. But I think the public has gotten onto a pile-on mentality.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Look at Boeing. Like a wheel comes off a 777. Thanks, Boeing. Like that.
Yeah,
they're not the ones
right.
doing the maintenance on that plane. Like,
well, so obviously, when a company gets big enough, they are. There's an inertia that takes over. They're just a superpower. They're doing great.
Yeah.
You also become the butt of jokes. It's kind of like the little indie band you loved is now like on MTV all the time, and they're selling out tours. You're like, oh, I used to love those guys. They sold out. They suck now. So that's just human nature. It's kind of hard to say.
I think you're one of it. Certainly, it's American cultural nature.
There you go.
To build up the little guy until he becomes the big guy, then tear him down.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah. No, you're probably right.
It's just, I empathize with Boeing, although there's a bunch of things they really have done wrong.
Yep.
The MCAS thing is not funny. Starliner's not funny, but at the plug door, not funny. But the other stuff, come on. And Intel, you're right.
But bad news feeds on itself. This is
totally. And I think it's just like we're in a time of echo chambers. And you get the wrong echo going, and you get a lot of noise. That's a lot of noise.
Yep. So yes, and tied to this, and very American, but capitalism. This need to grow and grow and grow.
Mm-hmm.
That need is how we get things like Snickers cereal, breakfast cereal. It's like, wait, what are we doing?
Now we've run out of good ideas, so we're gonna work our way down the bad ideas.
Yeah. So here's the thing. So here's some good and bad, I guess. Some data in the wake of this. Wall Street, which is akin to black magic, again, it's a dance, and Intel spiraling the drain from a sort of PR perspective. This stuff kind of piles on. So the day after they announced their earnings, their stock price went down almost 30% in 24 hours. Its biggest loss in the market since 1982.
Yeah.
And its second biggest loss of all time since it was a publicly traded company, which started happening in 1980. Its market cap went down by $30 billion. It is under $100 billion for the first time since 2009.
Yeah.
And it is worth a lot less than any of its competitors, most of which are actually smaller companies, if you will. NVIDIA is worth 2.69 trillion, or it was the day I wrote this article.
Yeah.
TMSC, 720 billion.
Yep.
Over 7 times Intel. AMD, tiny company, by the way, comparatively, 233 billion. And Qualcomm, 183 billion. All of these companies worth more than Intel.
Yeah.
So there was an analyst at what I would call like an industrial investment firm, someone who represents lots of really rich clients, and wrote a letter trying to explain what's happening with Intel. And I thought this was very measured. He said, look, if this wasn't Intel, we would be having a conversation now where this is a going concern.
Mm-hmm.
But he says, we got to look at this more pragmatically. This is a company that is getting subsidies from the U.S. government, contributions from partners.
Oh, because of the CHIPS Act. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you look at
billions,
what they expect, what they're doing, they will actually add $40 billion of cash to their balance sheet through the end of next year. So yes, layoffs are bad, bad news, things are going slow. Yep. But they're doing big work. There's a national security issue at stake here. I coined the phrase, maybe Intel is too strategic to fail, right? But honestly, they're kind of too big to fail, and they're generating too much money to fail. And so, yes, at this moment in time, this looks horrible.
Yeah. The layoffs mean they're going to generate more money for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. As long as they're not critical people, right?
Well, that was one of the things no one talks about, that they expect almost all of those layoffs to come in the form of people who volunteer to retire early, or maybe it's time, whatever. So we'll see.
This happens with big companies. You get a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to say this in a kind way.
Well, everyone did it. Microsoft, Apple, even. Although
Yeah.
I don't think they
Apple had to too, and everybody was saying,
eventually,
Apple
yeah.
will never do it. but they
Google,
did.
all the big tech companies overhired.
Everyone
Yeah.
did.
During
Well,
the pandemic,
not only
and
overhired,
then-
but then also found that when we have routine layoffs, conversations about unions and all of that sort
Yes.
of stuff
Yeah,
dies
that's right.
down.
That's
It's
right.
become
Right.
I feel like it's become an employee management strategy, which I find
Right.
offensive.
I do too.
But-
I do too.
It does seem to be going on. I don't know what other explanation there is at this point.
Corporations
I guess
can be
it's
very evil sometimes.
from a
They
news
can
cycle
really-
perspective. It's hard not to look at Intel and see something cratering here, but
there's
we'll see.
Hey, how much of this do you think, especially this 13 and 14th generation chip problem, is
Yeah.
YouTube generated?
Yeah, I don't. This is the thing, right?
Right.
So in other words,
a lot of this comes from YouTubers.
this is not. This is not a fact. I don't mean to say I've done some investigation and have found, but my belief, which God, you should take that to mean nothing, is that I don't know that this is any more serious than any other chip problems they've had over the past 2 decades. I really don't. You'd have to
This
go back
could
to
be a
Pentium
good
5.
congressional hearing and
Pentium,
say,
the
like,
first Pentium.
what are the failure rates of 11th gen and 12th
That's
gen
right.
compared to 13?
There are
and 14th
sites
gen?
and actually YouTube channels too that are starting to point out that, like, if you look at failure rates for chips, AMD chips are actually way worse
Mhm.
than these.
Oh, interesting.
Than these exact chips. So
interesting.
it's hard to say. But and by the way, here's another. So Intel over the course of just less than a week says, all right, look. Well, first of all, they acknowledge the problem publicly, which they don't do a lot.
Yeah.
That it has happened, but not a lot. And they said, look, we're going to do the right thing for our customers. So if you bought a core processor, Gen 13 or 14, with a PC, we're just extending the warranty by 2 years. Don't worry about it. And if you bought it yourself off the shelf, which is not a huge market,
No, that's me.
individuals. Yep. No, but people do it.
Yep.
Just contact support. And the story at the time was, if you contact support, obviously we're going to do the right thing for you. We're not going to leave customers stranded.
No, they'll just ship you another chip.
But YouTube guys, blogs, they're like, oh, I heard from a reader who called and they told them to go screw themselves. They're not going to do anything. So a couple of days later, Intel's like, all right, look, we're going to extend the warranty for everybody. If you bought it, it doesn't matter how you got it. If you have one, 2 years. So they're going to provide more details on that soon. And this is just like everything else we just talked about. You could look at this very negatively. Look, it's a part of a cycle of negativity and bad news around Intel. Yep, it absolutely is. But here is Intel doing the right thing for customers. And we should at least acknowledge that too.
Yeah, sure.
Right? I mean, it's part of the story. So whether this is overblown or not, in some ways doesn't
The question
matter.
is, does Gerlsinger keep his job? Like that's not going to be a fun board meeting. And I'm not going to blame him, because I think we're also in a market time where there is this overreact. But and there's a bunch of forces there, not just the echo chamber that is YouTube, but there are certain state actors that like to emphasize any failure of any entity in the United States.
That's right. I don't know. I don't remember, like, when did he become CEO? Like, how long ago was this? 5 years ago? Not even, something like that. He obviously you're looking at a broken company. This is a company that made the wrong bets for too long.
He's done everything right to fix it, in my
I think
opinion.
so. The problem for him is that from a public perspective, from an investor perspective, you've got the same face, the same guy saying the same thing every quarter, and it's not getting better. It's not. I don't think it's his fault.
He came back to Intel in 2021 to become
Okay,
CEO.
so it hasn't been
it's
that long.
Pretty
so he's
recent.
the Stephen Elop of Intel.
I think that's unfair. And I think
I actually think Stephen Elop did everything
did a
he
good
could
job.
with that
Oh,
company.
okay. All right.
I know.
He was
I said that.
It was the
knowing no one
Oh,
Nokia
else
head
believes
who
that.
was
Yeah.
came along.
I
when,
know very few
Microsoft
people
bought
think
them.
that's true, but I think I really do think he
He's
did
not
everything.
beloved.
I think that company was going right down the drain.
No, I think that board meeting would be scary.
Well,
But
but
I think there's no
his
who's gonna
conversation
replace
should
it?
be like,
Right.
look, this is a 5-year plan or whatever
Yeah.
it is. You have
They
to
give me the
that
5
time.
years, or it's on
If we
you.
don't get there, and I think we have to be honest with ourselves, whether you're on the board or an investor or whatever, that it's not him.
No.
Like I'm not saying he's doing that. There isn't some scenario or some other version of some other leadership and some other plan might have done something better, but it's possible this was not fixable.
I think I still like him. I know that. So
I do too.
Here's the problem. A lot of this is perception. It starts with YouTubers. It then becomes a stock market issue. That's when the stock tanks.
By the way, when we're allowing influencers to literally influence the stock price of it,
don't
no,
let
I mean,
influencers
can we draw the line at that, please? That's ridiculous.
Anyway, what's interesting about him, he's the first leader at Intel who's actually a chip engineer, a chip designer. I mean, he designed the 386.
CTO of Intel, right? Wasn't he previously CTO?
So he started at Intel at the age of 18 as a QC engineer. He was the lead architect on the 486. Well, the youngest VP in Intel's history at 32. He was mentored by, I'm looking at his Wikipedia, Andy Grove. He was CTO in 2001. Wi-Fi, under him, Wi-Fi, USB, Intel Core, Intel Xeon, 14 different chip generations.
I will. So it's because you mentioned Wi-Fi, you've reminded me that I'm reading what I can about what's happening with Lunar Lake, like this next gen chipset they're working at. And one of the things that Intel is requiring for this is something I have been begging for years and years and years, which is that you cannot buy one of these things without having a USB-C port on both sides of the laptop. You have to have at least one on both. There will be 3. One of them has to be on the other side.
My Apple laptop has 2 on one side and none on the other.
I know. I have been begging for this. Every once in a while, you'll get a laptop that does do this. I have 2 now that are like that. But this is, Intel, everyone makes, they have like all these stupid stickers and they have specs like Evo. And like, what does it even mean? It's marketing nonsense. Yeah. And like the thing maybe a lot of people don't understand is that's part of that. They're like, if you want this sticker thing, if you want the chip, you're going to do this. So it's Thunderbolt 4, Wi-Fi 7, the latest Bluetooth and USB-C ports where they belong, and the fast USB-C ports, not some baloney USB 2, whatever nonsense that we still see on PCs these days, right? So then they don't do everything wrong.
No, if I were on the board at Intel, I would say, Pat, you're bailing out a leaking ship, and this is, keep going because you got the right. I think he's got the right strategy, the dual. No, strategy.
It's not like he walked up to the deck of the Titanic with his little teacup and it's like, "Hey, what's going on, guys?" I mean, he flew in
those deck
on a
chairs.
rescue
They're
mission.
in the wrong place.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And you're going to give him more than 3 years. You may not give him more than 5 years, but you're going to give him more than 3 years, I think.
No, let's see if he can. See if he can turn it around. But the situation is serious. But I do think it's interesting to see that stock behaviors criticism is becoming more radical. Right, that it's not just Intel, it's also Boeing. Like there's other companies where
Boeing. Wait a minute. Boeing deserves it. What's going on?
Boeing deserves
Intel?
Some of it. Yeah, just like Intel deserves some of it.
Right.
I think Boeing is a much worse story.
I don't disagree. Right. I think there should be people in prison for what happened with MCAS.
I agree.
On the 737
I
Max.
agree. A chip fries doesn't necessarily
kill several hundred people.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
But when United has failed to do sufficient maintenance on a 777, so the wheel falls off and lands in a parking lot.
Yeah.
By the way, that's not Boeing.
Here's one a little closer to home. So we had that CrowdStrike outage. Whole world freaks out. Takes days to come back. There was one company that kind of stuck out there, right? Stuck out there, which was Delta. Delta was down for several days after everyone else had come back. And I made a point of, I discussed this. That's what I mean. So
CrowdStrike
I said early on, I'm like, I said, hold on a second. Let me get this straight. United's back. American's back. Everyone's back, but you're not back. And and then he came out and he said, the CEO of this company said, you never hear anything about Apple having an outage. Yeah, because iPads don't run the world's infrastructure, Jared. Like, seriously.
They apparently CrowdStrike came out about a $500 million lawsuit, right? Like, good luck with that.
If I was Microsoft, I would sue them for defamation right now. Yeah. CrowdStrike came out publicly and said, I just want to be clear. We want to be clear. We reached out to Delta several times to help them get over this. They never even responded to us.
They never even.
And then the other day, Microsoft issued a statement that said the same thing. Yeah. We have been reaching out to Delta since the beginning of this to help get them online. They have ignored our help. So, Yeah,
Which
that
to
was
me-
Delta.
That sounds
It was
like
not
the CEO of
CrowdStrike. It
Delta
was not
in
Microsoft.
defensive.
Yeah. So, look, it's bad enough. I mean, CrowdStrike, a lot of people, a lot of knee-jerk reactions, whatever. I get it. But again, as with Intel, you have to give them a little credit for one thing. God, they've been transparent. God, they've responded quickly. They took credit for this, not the right term, but they took responsibility for it immediately, right? They didn't wait for the Senate to have an investigation and figure out what, like they admitted to it. They explained what happened. They provided at least two that I can think of major updates, including one just the other day, or even the past 24 hours. Explaining exactly what went down. They've worked with Microsoft. They've documented what happened. They've talked about fixing the industry because we shouldn't let this kind of thing happen, yada, yada, yada. And Delta's over there. Oh, you never hear about Apple going down. Yeah.
By the way, you do hear about
Candy
Apple
Crush
going
is
down.
working fine. That's
They
true.
go down.
What are you talking about? You don't have infrastructure that you're running on. Anyway, that's insane. That's like saying, you don't hear about Charmin going down. Like, yeah, they make toilet paper. What are you talking about?
Actually, they do go down, but it's a different tube.
That's a different problem. Anyway.
Anyway.
Crazy.
Anywho.
Welcome to our industry.
Nice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I think a lot of the money that left Intel in the market went to NVIDIA. And it's a little bit chasing AI and chasing the latest fad.
But even
I know that
NVIDIA,
there's the wisdom of crowds and all that.
NVIDIA
But I'm
just
not
got
sure.
their first little bit of backlash. Their next gen is not working good. They got some problems.
They're holding off. They're not going to
now people are going to start beating on them, because that's the way we are. We're awful.
I hope we don't pile on, honestly, because I don't
bet we
think it's
will.
constructive.
And I think really, to some degree, that kind of short-term mentality of the stock market that companies respond to it's a source of a lot of problems.
It's a huge problem because you're responding and sometimes to things that are not true or coming from sources you should.
It's
not
ephemeral.
trust. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yep. Our entire planet is built on this shaky foundation of finances. It's crazy.
And the internet has caused it to vibrate even more severely than it used to.
That's true.
Once upon a time, this would have been news stories, not YouTubers.
Can I tell you something from the senior edge of life?
Okay. Yes.
You start to realize as you get older, it's all a house of cards.
But it's the only house we got.
It's the only house we got. And
I hesitate to consider the title of the book you're eventually going to write, something like "Everything Sucks, Nothing Works. It was all a lie."
It was all a lie. It was all a lie. Yeah.
Listen,
But
if we
it's
keep
life.
going down this
That's
path,
life.
I'm going to open the whiskey early, right? Like
it's an illusion that it's all, this is a well-run company and everything's going to be, it's all an illusion. It's all just people. It's people all the way down. And you know what? We're flawed and we do the best we can. And
but at least we're making AI that's not flawed like we,
oh dear. Oh dear.
Yep.
You are watching Windows Weekly. That's Paul Thurrott to my left. Wait a minute.
Isn't it?
Yeah. And that's
Which way am I
to my left. Am I mirrored? I don't.
You're
Anyway,
always
over that way is Richard Campbell.
you do great, Leo. You do great.
I don't know.
If you
How
both
does
go
it-
ways, it'd be good.
I didn't know the whiskey
work?
segment started early.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
You're
Thank you,
freaking
Kevin
me
Kelly.
out, man. What are you doing?
Kevin King is running the board today. Thank you, Kevin. John Ashley started us off. It's good. They're all getting trained because we're closing the studio today.
Congratulations.
I'm getting emails from people saying, "Can I have your microphone?" No,
That's
you
going to the
can't.
house. It's going to the house.
You
Leo,
can't
can I have
my
your ball?
microphone.
You know what I mean?
No, it's funny. I did a a keynote at Macworld Expo many years ago,
Mhm.
and I sat on the ball during the keynote,
Well, that's awesome.
and then I
Did you
threw
kick
it into the audience.
Yeah,
Yes.
there you go.
At the end, and then I realized I feel really bad about this. Oh crap, that's my only one. And I literally had to go wade into the audience saying, can I have my ball back?
Wow.
Humiliation, a little bit.
You
You're
could have got a
watching
new
Windows
ball.
Weekly. I should have.
Yeah.
What was I thinking?
Just go get a new ball.
Poor guy. Hey, dude, if you were the one who caught my ball at the Macworld
Like
Expo,
I still want it back.
no. He
you got
gave
it
it back.
Yeah.
I'll give you one. I'll give
Yeah.
you the one I'm sitting on right now. He doesn't
There
want
you
it
go.
now. All right, let's talk about, we talked about Copilot Plus PCs, but we didn't talk about Surface.
Yes.
Do you have anything to
So
say?
This has been a kind of a busy year for Surface, unless you count making money. So back in too soon.
Yeah.
Back in March, Microsoft announced 2 new products for business, right? Surface Laptop 6 and Surface Pro 10, based on Intel Core Ultra chipsets, right? Kind of came and went without a lot of interest from anybody. I mean, it's still, only on the business side, whatever. But we all knew that Copilot Plus PC versions were coming, and those arrived in June. So we have Surface Laptop 7 and Surface Pro 11,
right,
for consumers running on Snapdragon. Multiple configurations. The Pro version came with an OLED option for the first time. There was no 5G connectivity, however, but they said it would come. And Surface Laptop is 2 screen sizes, et cetera, like it's been for a couple of years now. So the other day they announced, I didn't expect it to happen this way, but there's going to be a version of Surface Laptop 7 and Surface Pro 11 for business, right, through their business channels as well. They're available for pre-order now. You can pre-order 5G on the Pro, but not the laptop.
That's nice.
Kind of limited configurations, more limited colors too. So there are 2 fun colors that you can sometimes get depending on configuration with Surface Laptop and Pro for consumers.
I think
but
the best
not
configuration was actually only black, right?
Yeah. So the one I got, black was my only option, but the one I really wanted was that kind of, I don't know the name of it, but it's a blue color. It's awesome. And
it's pretty.
There's also a sage
different
color, not available for business. So it's
I don't
platinum
need
and black.
another silver anything,
Yeah. So, it's whatever, it's business, I guess. But very specific configurations. They still have Snapdragon X Plus as an option on both devices on the low end SKUs. Snapdragon X, I'm not saying which one it is. I'm sure it's the same one everyone ships and the same one they shipped before, but whatever. Prices don't seem to be any better or worse or whatever than the consumer versions, except that if you want 5G, you got to pay for it. It's several $100s extra.
Wow.
Yeah, it's expensive. Plus you have to buy one of the higher ends, they kind of spec it out. So it's not great, but it's happening. And so those things I think they're arriving in September, probably. Yeah, September 11th, which is maybe not the best day to launch a product, but fine. And yeah, so you could spend as little as $10.99 for the laptop and for Pro. And then, the sky's the limit. I mean, I think the 15-inch decked out 32 gigs of RAM terabyte of storage, $20. So, and it's even more on the Pro side because you have all the keyboard choices with or without pen, the Flex version, et cetera, et cetera. So you could spend $3,000 probably or more, I'm sure, on a Surface Pro if you wanted to. I don't recommend that, but
yeah, only on the Surface Laptop. This is in the Canada site. In black, I can get a 64 gig version.
That's right.
The
and that's got to
blue's
be
called
26.
Sapphire.
I bet it's $26.99 in the United States, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So 36 with the 15-inch, $3,600
Yep.
Canadian.
Listen, I'll tell you this. You open that lid, man, it comes on every single time.
I'll tell you this. I spent more than that on the Studio too.
Yeah.
But I got a RTX 4060 in my Studio too. I can tell because it keeps burning my hand.
Well, I mean, it's probably good for Visual Studio.
Yeah, no, it's plenty. It's a lot of horsepower, but it all depends on what's using the GPU, right? What gets
I mean, if you're doing video,
it's the GPU.
Yep, it's
Intel. It's warped the case on my Pixel. That's how hot.
Yeah. Well, when you said that the first time, I thought you meant it warped the case on your computer. Thank God that wasn't the case. But
no, warped it on the phone.
Yeah, I can see that. It's hot.
But
you can export video very quickly.
There you go. And it's a Pixel 6. Like, it's just encouraging me to get a new one.
Yeah, it's time. You got about 1 week to go on that.
Yeah, before the 9s come along, and then we can see if I really go spend that much on a phone.
Yeah, I don't know how fast the lid comes on or whatever, but they're probably pretty good.
Yeah, phones,
ARM chips or something. I don't know.
I didn't do is see if I could get the 5G feature in Canada yet. I wonder if that's there.
Oh yeah. You should go to Surface for Business and find out. Yeah, I don't know.
It's a great question.
I think it. You know what? I'm sorry. I think I do know. I think it is. I think it's U.S. and Canada first, and then the rest of the markets later. I think if my memory serves, and don't.
It makes sense because our carriers are pretty heavily
now that
integrated.
you say that, that sounds familiar. Let me see. In September. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But anyhow, I considered putting this as the top story as a joke today. We have a lot of controversies in the Microsoft space, but one of the bigger ones is the new Outlook, which I did an unofficial kind of poll, and 0% of people like this app. I have not found anyone who likes it. I will say I don't use an email app because, I'm normal, but I tried it and to me, it seems fine, but I hate all email apps, so who cares? But it is the Outlook thing, integrated email, calendar, contacts, tasks, et cetera, all in one interface, et cetera, based on web technologies. That seems to really rub people the wrong way. But that's what all the modern apps are doing, because that's in Office in particular, that's the extensibility model. I mean, it's going to be web-based, guys. Like that's where everything is. So, you don't have to get it right now. You don't have to replace the thing you're using. If you're a consumer, you might be using Mail and Calendar in Windows 10 or 11. God help you if that's true, but you might be. And if you're in a business or a business user, you're probably using the I hate to say it this way, the now legacy Office Classic or whatever we're calling it, which is much more powerful and full-featured and bigger and heavier and complicated and all that stuff. But, a lot of people seem to like that app. And I think that's part of the problem. So this is like when a really popular band gets a new lead singer and he doesn't look or sound anything like the other guy, and people are freaking out like, what is happening here? So anyway, it's GA, which means it's not in preview. You're not going to see a little pre-tag on the icon anymore, but they will not replace Classic Outlook or whatever they're calling that for a couple of years at least. I think it was 2029, if I'm not mistaken, at the earliest.
Yeah, because I cannot stand this new Outlook. My God.
Yeah. I don't, like I said, I've not run into anyone who's been like, oh no, it's okay.
No, it's really not.
Like,
it's not okay.
The reaction is literally, I hate it with everything in my being.
Yeah.
And they always have like a list of what they need. What is it you want to do? You want to do something like, what do you want to be offline like a princess? I mean, what's your problem, man? I don't know. It's so weird.
But the new Outlook is great unless you want to do email.
Unless you like email, yeah. Unless you need email.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not a thing.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Crazy. So, moving along, I guess.
Here we go.
Yeah. So, big week. Biggest antitrust ruling in 20 years plus since Microsoft's.
Since 99, Google, I think, truly.
Yeah, Google was found guilty of abusing, Google has a search monopoly that is now a legal finding of fact.
Yeah.
That's also just common sense. You just have to look at their usage share numbers. You get it.
Yeah.
Google was also found guilty of illegally abusing that monopoly. And what that means is they are maintaining and or growing it through means that have nothing to do with making the product better. They're using their power to hurt competitors and harm partners and in effect harm consumers as well through higher prices, because a monopoly, one of the many things they can do is raise prices indiscriminately. There's no competition, which the judge made a really long and good point of making by comparing them to Microsoft. So, which was kind of tough.
Well, I remember James Barksdale back in the old Netscape soups pointing out how many people here are using Internet Explorer.
Oh, he's
put up their hand. Like,
he's the source of so much humor in entertainment. It's like, I'm not a big city lawyer, but that kind of thing. Like he has that kind of, Midwest Rube kind of thing. And that guy.
The problem is it's not search that makes the money. It's the ad business, and they don't have a monopoly on the ad business.
Yeah, but they're intrinsically tied. So there's if you look at, I report on Alphabet or Google's earnings, and so if you look at that part of the business, ads overall, I think last quarter was 74% of their revenues.
But if you look at the overall ad market, they're a big player, but they're not the only player.
No, right. But they do have a monopoly in search. And so this is the product tying thing. In other words, they've tied these two things together, and they've created kind of a virtuous cycle for themselves from a financial sense, because they've gotten really good at this, right? They're really good at it. And they also partner with platform makers, companies like Apple and Samsung and others that make Android phones. And they partner with browser makers, most notably Mozilla, like we know about this, and to ensure that Google search is the default, because most people just don't even think about switching, right?
No, because there's only one.
Yeah, I mean, but this feeds on itself. And so this notion that they're kind of paying to play, if you will, but they get the users from that helps them improve the search, which they do. And search gets better. More people want to use it. That's the virtuous cycle. The problem is that's illegal when you have a monopoly. And this is in the documents. I mean, I think it was 2022 or 2022. I think it was the last one, over $20 billion. It's been going up every year. Mm-hmm. The rumor, there was a story that the last year it was 23 billion to Apple. For Apple, this is 23 billion in raw profit. They don't have to do a thing. There's no research and development. There's no engineering. There's no nothing. They just take the product as it is. It's great, works well, whatever. Everyone thinks those guys hate each other. Surprise.
Yeah. I have 23 billion reasons not to hate you.
Yep. And, Apple's Apple. They still would like to replace them if they could, but they look at like, what would it take for us to create or
more money than that?
Yep. And that's to me, the most interesting thing that comes out of this is the Microsoft connection, because Microsoft connects to this in two major ways. One is the legal precedent, because this case is exactly like the DOJ case against Microsoft in 1998 or 9 or whatever year that was. And because Microsoft is the only other major company that has a search engine that might compete with Google, except that they have 6% of the market compared to 90, whatever it is.
I would argue that it's not a competitor in the search engine space. It's a threat to Google. It's replacing the search engine with a large language model.
Well, okay, but that was not what was in. I hear you, and I even agree with that. But this was about search, right? In other words, Microsoft has the opposite effect that Google gets in search, where they don't have enough users. Mm-hmm. They can't improve it as much. Yeah, it doesn't make sense for them to spend the money they would have to spend, and it's off the Microsoft / Bing mentioned 500 something times in this 286 page ruling. Now, some of them were Microsoft Bing, so there's overlap there, but several hundred times. And I didn't count it. I know I'm lazy, but this is astonishing. I'll just tell you from a legal precedent perspective, 100%. The parallels here are obvious. They don't even need to be discussed. The fact that Microsoft went from the hunter to the hunted in such a dramatic fashion over the past 20 whatever years is really astonishing, at least in this market, right? They are the biggest or one of the biggest companies on earth by market cap. Right. Powerful market power.
And they should have owned search back in the day.
But the most dramatic story in this entire ruling is the multiple times that they went, Microsoft, to Apple and said, hey, it's in our mutual best interest to defeat Google here. Let's do this. And there was no version of the numbers that made any sense. Mm-hmm. They couldn't. Apple calculated that they could have given them Bing for free and then paid them 125% of whatever revenue they would have made. And it still didn't make sense. And it was never going to happen. And again, I want to be super fair here. It's not Microsoft's fault exactly. It's maybe a little bit like the Intel stuff we were talking about earlier. Microsoft couldn't invest in Bing over the years like Google did in search because they just weren't generating the usage and all that kind of stuff. Right. So, at the end of the day.
Well, and to be clear, like they genuinely had a better search algorithm. Like
Google did.
Google produced better results. There were other search engines when they were first coming on.
There were, I don't remember everything, but being here and covering this for the duration, I mean, there were moments in time where Microsoft did something that was like, okay, like, that's interesting. They would come up with these kind of, I guess I'll call them vertical search things that were very interesting, whether it was Windows Live Search at the time or Bing eventually, whatever. Where they did a better job in some capacity for certain things. Microsoft has the power defaults working for them in Windows with Edge, right? It's the default there. It's now being used by Copilot, of course. And to your point, Richard, I think there's a coming battle over whatever we call this thing, but I look at it as a combination of AI and search, and whether it's AI making search better or search making AI better or both, right?
I mean, there's other angles you could have gone at this on. Like, look, I don't search on Google for products anymore. I go to Amazon.
Yeah.
Right? Like that there is a fragmentation of the search market, but only if you look at it in the ways that people actually use it.
So
That being said,
It's
I don't have a problem with declaring those guys a monopoly. Like, they kind of earned it, and they have been distinctly anti-competitive. They have done everything they can to suppress competition in their primary space.
The way that people kind of react to these stories, like the dominant big tech companies, is very interesting to me, right? Some companies get a pass by a very large percentage of the audience, like Apple. This happens to Apple all the time. It's like, what are you talking about? Like,
dude, if you want to talk about a pass,
they love the environment. They are, they're good people. They, Google, it's like, oh yeah, screw them. Like, they're horrible, But the thing is, like, they're all companies, guys. Like, I mean, come on. And they all follow a very familiar pattern of abuse once they're dominant. And that abuse is what makes their dominance persist and what makes their dominance grow, right? And there's a real fear now with AI that this will keep happening, and it will. I mean, we're not going to prevent it. There's no doubt about it. But the thing I call it, I think of this as a paradox. This is probably not the right word, but people have trouble with things that they believe are mutually exclusive, right?
Right.
Like, I could say something negative about Google and I could say something positive about Google. They can both be true, right? Like, Google objectively has the best search engine on the internet. I think most people would agree with that, probably pretty strongly, but whatever. Google also has behaved in extremely anti-competitive ways to undermine their partners, their competitors, and they've harmed consumers in doing it. Those things can both be true.
Yes.
They both are true, by the way. But, and that's true of Apple. It was true of Microsoft back in the day. We integrated Internet Explorer into Windows, and it benefits consumers. Here's the list of ways in which it benefits them. They're like, yeah, okay. I mean, we can kind of go back and forth and whatever, but you also integrated it into Windows in such a way that it disadvantages competitors because they can't be integrated with Windows to the degree that you are.
Right.
And the default experience is you, and you're not offering a way to switch. And you're using your market power with Windows to gain entry into this market.
And then your defense is, well, it's so heavily integrated now we can't remove it, which didn't make the story better.
This is where Google and Microsoft diverge, and where Apple and Microsoft connect, because Microsoft, during that trial, the judge said, hey, you guys should sell a version of Windows that doesn't have Internet Explorer in it. And Bill Gates was like, yeah, let's do it. Rip it out. And then they shipped this version of Windows that didn't work. And he's like, what are you doing? And he's like, I didn't ask you to ship a broken product. He's like, you told us to take it out. That's what happens. Yeah. Because you artificially engineered it in such a way, right? And that's what Google's doing in the EU right now, right? It's the same thing. It's like, well, you told us. We're just meeting to let you. We did what you said.
It's called malicious compliance.
This is how children behave. Like, that's ridiculous. Yeah. So Google didn't do that. Google didn't release a version of the search engine that brought you to the wrong page or give you the answers to the wrong question or whatever. But, the tactics are all basically the same. The reason they're there, the reasons they're there are basically the same, right? So, yeah, fun. So, for me, it's like deja vu,
Yeah.
It's, we're back again. We're doing it.
Well, at the same time, it's like, how did you let yourself get here?
Well,
is this hubris?
How do you not fall into this trap there's no version of, oh no, we don't just keep reaching for more money.
Yeah. Every tech company sucks when they lead.
Yep.
As long as they're chasing, they're fine. But the moment they lead, problems.
This is Richard knows this better than anybody, but one of the big myths in the Microsoft space is that once Microsoft obtained a monopoly, I guess we'll call it, or dominance in the web browser market, they stopped working on the product.
Yeah.
And they let it sit there. And that's when Mozilla first came in with Firefox, or, eventually Phoenix, Firefox, whatever. And then eventually Chrome, of course. And by the time they kind of got their mojo back and started working on IE again, it was too late. And then they switched to Edge and it was too late. And then they changed Edge to something new. And it's still too late, basically, although they're doing okay.
The question you have
What's
to
the
ask
real
is,
reason, Richard?
What were they doing?
They were working on .NET.
No, they weren't.
I thought they moved on to WPF, didn't they?
They were working on WPF. Remember, WPF wasn't supposed to be in .NET. That happened later.
Oh, okay.
And let's get crazier and really talk about what we're talking. What it became WPF.
Yep.
What they were actually doing was re-engineering HTML entirely,
because the Windows shell was going to be based on something like HTML.
And I think Bill had in his mind that he wanted to come up with a better web. But this was first we'll make it work in Windows, then we'll make it work everywhere.
It would be just like the web, but there'd be like a start button in the corner.
There you go.
And it had a little Microsoft logo on it.
Yeah. And a dollar goes to Bill every time you click on it.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Is there a cash register in here?
Yeah, no.
What's the sound scheme?
They literally kept that team together. And the kicker was that Bill was chief architect then. He just stepped down as CEO as all that went on. So arguably had entirely too much time to work on that.
This was the presentation part of what would have been a bigger strategy around, database file systems and, computer, internet, whatever, communications, et cetera, et cetera. So,
well, and the code name was Avalon for a reason, right? It was the paradise.
Right. It still is, baby. I was just playing around in it today. I love WPF. It's still paradise. It's not perfect, but
yeah.
What else is happening in our world? Oh, and this is only sort of related, but this is going to start impacting people. So Google's been threatening to roll out Manifest v3 for several years, which isn't actually the problem. The problem is when they obsolete Manifest v2, which is the manifest that extension makers use to block ads and trackers in Chrome and also Chromium-based browsers, right? Well, in other browsers too, that Chromium, Safari and Mozilla as well. So this past month, they quietly slipped into some release notes somewhere. They have a schedule for this now. They're doing it. And one day, week to go, something like that. If you went to the Chrome web store and you looked for what are the best security products, they had a little section up there for Chrome. Number one, uBlock Origin. Google loves it. But then you click on it and there's a warning at the top of the page that says, this doesn't conform to our security principles anymore. We're getting rid of this. This is going to stop working soon. And the problem is that this thing, of course, uses Manifest v2 and they're switching to v3. So what the uBlock folks did was they created a different version I think it's called uBlock Lite, that will work with v3. They claim it's dramatically less effective. I've talked to a few people, I guess maybe that's not too many, but who said this works exactly the same. It's fine. And over the past few years, a lot of these companies, like the guys from Ghostery, have come out a lot to talk about this. I think the EFF, which I believe makes Privacy Badger, has talked about this. It's actually possible to. This is a lot like the kernel access stuff in Windows that CrowdStrike. It's possible in v3 to actually do pretty effective blocking. It's okay. But this is happening. So for the short term, unless you're Microsoft, if you're using Edge, you're screwed. But if you're on any other Chromium-based browser, they're going to keep the v2 stuff going as long as they can. They're already forking Chromium as it is, but they'll keep that stuff working. It will continue working in Firefox. They're on their own thing. I don't know anything about Safari, but I assume they're doing something similar. So if you like and use uBlock Origin and you're on a different browser, you're going to be okay for at least for some amount of time. But if you're using it on Chrome, I mean, that's sending some mixed messages, isn't it? Yeah. It's like, I want to use the worst possible browser with the best possible. Like, what are you doing? Like, just use Brave for crying out loud. It doesn't even need this thing. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that's happening. So just be aware of that, because I think a lot of these other extensions are going to start running into some issues soon as well. It's not going to be just.
When you wonder if the fork will be long term, right? Forks often happen just to maintain compatibility, but at some point, we could see a Firefox or somebody just never come back to take on Manifest 3.
Well, even something like Brave, right? So Brave said, we're going to keep maintaining this as long as we can, but they can't promise forever, right? So
no, there's going to come some point, important features they have to have.
Yeah, like Chromium will itself evolve to the point where the v2 stuff work that they've kept going is not going to work anymore. So somewhere down the road,
there's going to be things in Chromium you now need to have, probably security related. And the only way to get them is to merge the line again. And that means you're getting Manifest 3.
Yeah, which is why you should use Brave, because you don't need this thing anyway. Who cares if they support v2? It doesn't need it.
Yeah,
it's built right in. But yeah, anyway, that's happening. And then Microsoft, I think, in the same way that Microsoft releases updates for Windows 11 all the time, I feel like now they're on a little cycle where like they spin a wheel and it's like, all right, 3 days from now, we're going to talk about security again. Yeah. And they just I don't want anyone to forget that we're really serious about security. I know we say that a lot, but we're really serious about security. They were making their security the top priority of the company back in November, I think it was, with that new SDI or whatever the thing is called. They announced in May, right, tied to builds. There was a big push in Windows 11.
Yep,
security is our top priority. That CrowdStrike thing happened. Just want to remind everybody we're super serious about security, and to prove that, we're going to fix this problem with the industry because we love you guys. We don't want this to happen anymore. And a memo leaked from Microsoft internally. Microsoft, by the way, has a chief people officer.
Of course they do.
Again, kind of
That's just that's the new age name for HR. That's all.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. The guy
That's
who
what
fires
that
people.
is. Yeah. It's the HR.
He literally walks around wearing a Darth Vader costume just to make it clear what his job is.
He's a people person. I'm a people person.
Like, who does he like respond? Like who's his direct report? Like what's
I do not believe.
Yeah. He's like, pray I don't alter the deal again.
Faith.
So he sent out an email to everybody at Microsoft and said, look, just want to remind everybody, we're super serious about security. And we are going to base your future earnings as an employee on how well you conform to this.
This never ends well. Google did this with social, which created Google Plus.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think Meta did it with the metaverse.
Right.
Look how well that's gone.
Yep.
I hope Microsoft's sincere about this.
The way
it's
I imagine
ironic
this
that
is
it's
like
right
guys,
after the CrowdStrike thing.
The guys in the AI division are all like, hey, are we actually going to do this? And they're like, no, that doesn't apply.
No.
Don't worry about that. Yeah,
it is interesting how they're essentially have to do internal memos in public, right? Like that's the only way to make it real.
Yeah, that's it. Right. This is the perfect way.
That's a good point.
Well, because you really want. Yeah. We have said we are serious about security several times in the past few months, and no one seems to believe it. Can anyone think of a more effective way to communicate?
Why don't they believe it? I wonder why.
Yeah, here's an idea. Threaten every employee, and then they'll believe it.
Yeah.
so that's what they did.
Well, your pay package is going to be affected by your role in security.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the thing.
That's how you do it.
This is the new stack ranking, right?
There you go.
It's security ranking.
Well, you still have they still have their OKRs, right? I deal with this sort of thing all the time interacting with Microsoft employees where it's like, this isn't tied to my OKR, then I'm not doing it. And so if that really
are they saying that's part of your OKRs now?
Yeah, I hope it is, because they do have to take security seriously, and they do have to be able to pull the andon cord to stop production to say we have a serious security problem rather than wave past it. To put in, you talk about the big SFI kickoff. That was finding a bunch of dev resources on Azure that were that didn't follow security process.
Well, which, by the way, was the net cause of that late 2023 security vulnerability that no one's talking about anymore, thanks to CrowdStrike. Thank you, CrowdStrike.
Yeah,
right? We're not talking about that anymore.
No. And there is a fix to CrowdStrike, right? There is API calls they can now have, and arguably Microsoft should be saying, if there isn't, we'll make you one.
Right.
We'll push it out in 22H2 for you.
Yeah,
the thing
they're almost certainly doing right now is, well, first of all, they kind of did fix this already. It's just that no one really knew what happened. So now you can just kind of re-promote it like it's new. I mean, we're going to work with CrowdStrike and the other security vendors so they can implement these new out of the kernel APIs and blah, blah, blah. This stuff's been around for 5 years, but you know what? Don't worry about it. We're just going to, make it happen.
The other side of this is CrowdStrike has to look at how many dev cycles that represents versus the feature set their customers are demanding. Like all you're doing is fixing something that nobody can tell if you fixed it correctly. You can only tell if you screw it up.
And we don't actually understand the benefit to it, to the approach you took. Right.
No,
right. How
almost guaranteed will be slower because transitioning through a security boundary takes time.
Yep. This is sure. This was, but this.
This but you still put locks on doors, right? Like
this is the NT architecture. You remember they moved the graphics into the kernel, and it was like, what are you doing? And like, it's faster. Like, yeah, of course it's faster. Yeah. But that was a big debate at the time. NT was pretty top.
Well, and the argument was as soon as you don't allow third-party drivers in Ring 0, and the answer after Vista was, forget it, we'll just write the drivers.
Yes, right. Which, like everything else in the world, the hardware vendors hate that kind of thing, but that's part of the story recently where they said, hey, here's an idea. We'll write the printer drivers now.
If I'm responsible for 20,000 machines in my office, I'm going to run reference drivers. I don't care about features. I care about reliability.
Oh, that's okay. That's an interesting and appropriate kind of customer facing view of it. But from Microsoft's perspective, we just saw it. They get blamed for everything, right?
Yep. We're going to catch it anyway. You're still going to use PSS.
We're gonna fix printers. We don't even make a printer. We've never made a printer, but we're still gonna fix this because apparently you guys can't stop writing crappy drivers. So we're gonna fix it. Yeah. And because we are the ones who get blamed, we're the ones who get called, and we are the ones who get threatened because they're gonna move to some other platform, and it was your fault. So I mean, this is a pretty common pattern, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, and it's a tough problem because part of Microsoft's whole play is having a broad ecosystem with many vendors so that you have lots of choice. But then they have to do things they're not good at.
double-edged sword. And every one of those companies has a different strategy for success that is counter to what everyone else is doing. This is the reality. I mean, so yeah, it's good and bad.
No, if there were simple answers, we would have used them.
It's weird because there isn't really nuance anywhere else in life. And it's funny, we've never encountered this before.
Nuance? What's that?
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just still really amazed that I still haven't opened this bottle of whiskey. I
know. Okay. So that's what I'm about to say. Still to come. We've got earnings. There are still some earnings on the table. We've got Xbox, and Richard has said that this is a really good.
I'm very happy with what I found.
Liquor coming up. Yeah. So all of that ahead. You're watching Windows Weekly. Richard Campbell with RunAs Radio and .NET Rocks at runasradio.com. Paul Thurrott at thurrott.com. Me, I'm the little old winemaker me. No, I'm just sitting in the middle. Do you remember those ads?
Yeah.
The little old winemaker me. I can't remember. I don't remember what the wine was. It was around the same time as Bartles and James.
I was gonna say it's got to be like Reuniti or something.
Yeah, I think it was. It's like it was some horrible wine. Back in the old days, people didn't know wine, and they were drinking.
Orson Welles used to do like a wine ad for some.
Yes, little old wine drinker me is a Dean Martin song.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, but that makes sense. They would use it in a
Matus Rosé. Let's continue on. Paul, you got some earnings for us?
We do.
Swiss Colony.
Thank you.
That's
the little winemaker
I would never come up with
Swiss Colony.
There's a cut.
So kids won't remember this, but there was a time when people didn't really know anything about wine, and they drank the worst wine possible.
Cheap.
Boone's Farm. The first thing I ever got drunk on as a teenager.
The best.
Boone's Farm. There was Bartles and James, which was like a drink of some kind. There was Matus, and there was Swiss Colony, and it was all terrible wine. But we didn't know. What did we know?
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know if it's better now or
schnapps.
Yeah. The kids still drink Jaeger.
Poison down my throat.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
There it is. Italian Swiss Colony.
Well,
they're still around, aren't they? I think they are. I think they're just up the road a piece.
Sorry for the digression, but
anyway.
They're not like outside of Detroit. What?
New York State wine is the wine region.
The Ottawa wine region. So it could exist. I don't know. Global warming. You never know. Last week we talked about Microsoft's earnings, obviously blockbuster. We mentioned Intel, kind of lightning round this one because we got some big tech and then just some chip maker stuff. So ARM Holdings, right? They're almost $1 billion in revenues, up 39%, by the way, in revenues. Gross margins, that's up to 96.5%. You thought it couldn't get any higher. They did not raise their annual earnings forecast, and actually that Wall Street punished them for that. They expect crazy growth. They're looking for some sort of AI play, but yeah. So here's what's amusing to me. You folks may remember that ARM is suing Qualcomm for its Nuvia-based Snapdragon X chips that we keep talking about, because it wants them to pay both royalties, right? Not just the Qualcomm royalties, but the Nuvia royalties. And Qualcomm's argument is, we pay you more royalties than anybody. What are you talking about? We have a set of royalties. This is covered by our royalties. ARM disagrees. So that's kind of hanging over Snapdragon X, but it didn't stop ARM from promoting Snapdragon X in their earnings announcement without mentioning Qualcomm once, which is awesome. Awesome. So they said, during the quarter, Microsoft announced its first generation Copilot Plus PCs on ARM. Double the battery life of the closest PC competitor and on par with Mac OS. Every major software app and developer tool now runs natively on Windows on ARM, including Office, Chrome, Slack, and GitHub. Blah, blah, blah. Nope, no Qualcomm. Qualcomm played no role in that.
Yeah.
So
well done. Well, nice piece of writing.
I love that kind of stuff. That's good. And then and speaking of Qualcomm is also doing really well, although they've got a smartphone-like problem that like Intel has with PC, or I guess with everything. They keep pushing back like when smartphones are going to come back. The interesting little side story for this company is that the architecture they created or modified or whatever for Snapdragon X is what they're going to use for their next generation phone chips. And they're going to announce those in October at their annual Snapdragon event. So maybe this was their way of saying, yeah, Snap, that's the sales of that stuff is fairly flat. Although honestly, that part of the business rose 12%, just like Intel's PC part of the business rose 9%, right? So actually, that's still doing well. But the next big jump in revenue gains is going to happen with these next gen chips. Presumably, that's not going to happen in time for the holidays. So Wall Street not too happy with them either. Apple made what I'm going to call, this is like a financial term, $1 bajillion, I think was the term.
Bajillions.
$85.8 billion on $21.4 billion in net income profit, right?
Yeah.
These are single digit gains, but come on, it's like the biggest company. It's like humongous.
Yeah.
iPhone revenues roughly flat. They actually fell a little bit, but still 93 point something billion compared to 39 point something billion compared to 90. She's like, can't read, to 39 billion something last year. So basically the same, 45% of their revenues. The big news here is that for the past, I'm going to say 2 years-ish, services has been their second biggest business.
Nice.
Right?
It should be
Followed
bigger.
by, in shifting order, Mac and iPad, right? And then the other devices they make. But this quarter, I didn't realize this until after I'd written my story. Services was bigger than everything else that Apple makes combined, except for iPhone. So when you add up the revenues from Mac, iPad, and then the other part, which is wearables, home, and accessories, services made more than all of those. Yeah,
services should always been the biggest business.
Well, they got into it late, right?
And I don't think they've grown it particularly well either. I think they have a tough time. They're really a hardware company. Services business is a different mindset.
Yeah, it's a different, right. And Apple's strength was never software. They're doing better. And part of that ecosystem manifesto, I guess I was delivering earlier, is that one of the interesting things about their service is that most of them, not all of them, but most of them work like everywhere you have an Apple device, right?
Yeah,
so
as well as should. That's
you don't get like
being in the walled garden. It should be absolutely symmetrical.
Yep. Yeah. So that's kind of, it's getting there, but it's getting there. We'll see what it looks like when Apple or Google's $23 billion in revenues goes away, because that's about 25% of that business's revenues. So that's going to be interesting.
The other question mark for me is Apple Intelligence doesn't show up in this earnings report yet. Because granted, they have not shipped it, but you'd think the believers would just buy. But I think, and I'm one among them. Like, I would consider an iPhone if Apple Intelligence really is great.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think when I'm going to see you next. That's an interesting conversation. It's going to be a lot more interesting when there's more to see. But
Ignite in Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago would be November. So by then we'll actually have something to look at. So
hopefully,
I would say the big difference between Apple and say Microsoft and other platform, and actually Google, right? The two platform makers that are also kind of all in on AI and are CapExing the hell out of AI infrastructure costs. Apple is not doing that, right?
No.
Apple's in an interesting position where they can go to like OpenAI and say, we'd like to partner with you. Yeah. And we're not giving you anything. You just want access to our customer base, just like Google does, right? I mean, so this is a virtuous cycle thing for them. This may work out for them because they don't really have to. I mean, they will.
I think they're being the slow mover side of things is pretty great. I said a line on a different call, not a show related call, where I said, listen, we all know people are screaming about a gold rush and there's lots of shovels and jeans being made. I'm just still looking for the gold. And from Apple's perspective, this slow approach is almost always paid off. And in this case, it's particularly good because the costs are so astronomically high early in the cycle. Yeah. It makes it prohibitively expensive. Yeah. It's so, although again, we are talking about companies that are paying for this stuff with cash, right?
Yes. That's right. There's only a couple that can.
So. What's the difference between what they would normally do and this? Fewer stock buybacks, but only fewer. Yeah, right? Exactly. Like that's all that's happening is, we have something to do with this cash.
There's different ways that companies can invest the money they got, from investors and grow the value of that stock. And Apple's pretty good. They're pretty good at making money. I mean, say what you will, but they're pretty good at that. Really good at that. Maybe is the right way to say that. So, and then Amazon, of course, I don't know what's north of $1 bajillion, but they made $148 billion in revenues and a net income of $13.5 billion. they're interesting because the vast majority of their revenues comes from retail operations, as I would call it, like online stores, physical stores.
They're a warehousing company.
Stores. Right. They're a logistics company, in some ways, right? But their most, I'm going to call it profitable business by percentage anyway, is of course AWS, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 22.1 billion in revenues, 5.4 billion in net income.
Yeah. Those are normal tech company numbers. Back to the whole AWS.
You look at that part of the company and you see tech. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, no.
You look
If
at the
you're
rest
an
of it, it's like,
investor-
what is this?
Yeah. If you're an investor, you're like, these companies need to be split apart. I'll take shares in both.
Yeah. So, right. Yep. Yeah. There's an argument to be made that Amazon did anyway, and because they're starting to be profitable overall. That was not the case for a while. That they were able to leverage the profits from AWS to foist new businesses onto the world,
which may lead them down an antitrust path, right? Where
that's what I mean. Yeah, like that may be. Yeah, yep. Because it's not just that you got. Yeah, we usually talk about you got a monopoly, you deserved it, you made a great product, God love you. But there's also that version where you got a monopoly through illicit means, and that is also illegal. You don't have.
Well, because if you are into Amazon from a retail company, their margins are predatory. I mean, huge money. Yeah. Yep. And if you're in it because they're a tech company, their margins are garbage because the margin should be 20, 30+%, right? And they're not, they can't do that because they have these two combined businesses that really don't get along all that well.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, they're not even related in any way, really, right? No. I mean,
one feeds the other. The retail operation is a customer of the cloud business.
Yeah, I didn't get into this, with the Intel stuff, but Intel reports their fab business as if it were a second business separate from them, right? It's not, but because they're trying to show that this thing can be profitable on its own and will be a profit center at some point or whatever. But Intel, AMD could do. Amazon could do that with AWS in a way, and actually, honestly, you can see what it would be because they are very transparent about the numbers. So you kind of get a look into that if you wanted to.
All right.
Okay.
Ready?
Xbox.
So excited.
There's some stuff going on. I'm just trying to say, I don't have any like super bad news about Xbox this week, so that's kind of fun. But
it's the news we're still missing.
Cross your fingers. I mean, it's the day is young, but there are two big industry events coming up in the next 30 days or so, and both of them are in Germany. Which is like, when was the last time you ever said that?
That's when all the Xbox stuff happens is in Germany.
Yeah, so Gamescom is happening end of August in Cologne. I always struggle with that. Cologne. Yeah. And then in very, very end of August, I think beginning of September is IFA, which is in Berlin. So opposite sides of the country, opposite sides of the business, whatever. But Microsoft is not just going to Gamescom, but they are going to show off over 50, as they said it, playable games. And
how many unplayable games are they going to show off? That's what I want.
Well, then it's no, that's what they did when they showed off that Redshift game or whatever it's called. What was that vampire game? That piece of crap. So unplayable, which is not the thing you want to see in the title of the review. No, what that means is they're not going to just show up videos. They're going to put games out on the floor. People can walk up and play them. So Star Wars games, Indiana Jones games, all kinds of stuff. So
still sounds funny.
Good. That's good. Yeah. And this one I've not looked at, but there is a free first-person shooter called Valorant, which is on Xbox Series X and S and PlayStation. It's supposed to be pretty fantastic. And it's on PC, so I have no excuse. But I'm going to take a look at this. It looks interesting.
It's supposed to be really good. Yeah. It
looks like a next-gen Overwatch, maybe, that kind of game. Yeah. Kind of slightly
a lot of people love it.
Graphics. Yeah. It's supposed to be fast moving,
more down the realism path than Overwatch, but
right.
Not much more. Not much.
No, but like we're not quite Pixar, but better than cartoon, I guess. So this one I might need a little bit of help on because I've been complaining. You probably didn't notice about the lack of Activision Blizzard games on Game Pass, but if I'm not mistaken, there's something called Crash Bandicoot and Insane Edition Trilogy. Isn't that an Activision Blizzard game?
Not originally, no. I mean,
No?
they may have ended up buying it.
Is it Sega? Who made Crash Bandicoot?
Yeah, I think it was originally a Sony game
Oh, geez. Okay.
built by
All right,
Naughty
then,
Dog.
then
for
never
Sony
mind. This is
PlayStation.
yet another
That's
month.
why-
With no
that's why it's
games.
PlayStation.
Goddamn these people.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that's coming to Game Pass in the second half of this
We'll
month.
see.
The Mafia Definitive Edition. This is a good month because I actually recognize some of these games.
Mm.
So that's
Yeah,
pretty good.
names you can recognize.
Yep. And plus, the recent Call of Duty, right, is there now as well.
Never
So
heard of it.
it's a little indie game. They're trying to make it work.
Yeah,
They'll get there. So Sony and Microsoft, Sony and Nintendo, I'm really losing my ability to speak here, also announced their earnings. These guys are both at the tail end of their cycle for the current gen console. So things are, they're doing what
with
they're
no
doing.
real
But,
sign of what the next gen console looks
yeah, there's been not a lot of rumor on the Sony side. So the
Oh.
PlayStation 5 only sold 2.4 million consoles the most recent quarter. It was 3.3 a year ago.
like. Yeah.
Over 60 million overall. They're on track to have the worst selling PlayStation console of all time. Like this is probably going to be the slowest selling of all of them, right?
It's expensive.
It's not their fault in many
Yeah.
ways. They and Microsoft both chose to launch these things for better or worse right in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Lots of component shortage problems. Remember,
Mhm.
Sony did a better job with that than Microsoft, and they are outselling the Xbox by a pretty wide margin. But their game business, which is called Game and Network Services, lots and lots of money. They're doing great. Actually, I think it's their biggest. Yes, their biggest business overall. Sony. You have to all the math I do with Sony. It's like what it looks like if you don't include their financial services business, which is a huge part of the company. But they sold 53.6 million software units. They had a game, Helldivers 2, that sold 12 million units in the
It's
quarter.
really, really great game.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So they're, given where they are, good. They have 160 million monthly active users on PlayStation Network. That's up 7% plus over a year. So yeah, good. Nintendo had been doing great, but their latest report wasn't great, and they declined to update on when the next gen Switch was coming. Remember, they had said they didn't say they'd release it; they'd said they'd announce it before the end of their fiscal year, which is ending at the end of March rather. And they did not. They had nothing to add to that. They didn't lower their earnings forecast for the rest of the fiscal year, which is good, I guess. But like Sony did that last year, and that didn't work out. So. They only sold 2.1 million Switch consoles in the quarter. That was down 46% from last year. They sold
But they
almost
did
4
very
million.
well last year.
Yeah, they're doing bad right now. So
Well.
software sales, same thing, 41.3% down. The little asterisk here is that last year Nintendo benefited from something that makes no sense to anyone who has a brain in their head because they don't. Why would you think this? But Nintendo is starting to get into movies again, and they had a Mario movie last year that really helped sales of their games, and that was the bump they got.
The
So-
other part of this is you're doing year over year measures, and they don't make new machines every year.
Yeah.
Right? They barely
there's
even make
right.
new
There hasn't been a
games every
rev.
year.
Yep. There's
Yeah.
still OLED's still the best one.
But I do like the idea that there is things they could do, like making movies and things that engender enthusiasm for certain.
And they actually
games
did
that
say that they're
spike
working
new
on a
sales.
sequel to that movie, and they're hoping to get a little bump from that whenever it comes out.
You can't crank out a movie every year either. Like it takes.
See,
multiple
that depends on
teams
who
to
you
do
are,
that.
Richard. So I don't know if you know how Netflix makes movies, but give me if you all you need is
With
like
lots of teams.
Ryan Reynolds and a green screen, and you could get a
There you go.
crap
Yeah,
out of
good for
movie in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
They do a
I
bunch of
think
those.
It's more of a John Favreau thing, but yeah.
Yeah. Right. That's it. Right. It'll make a start. We have yet another Star Wars series.
Yet another Star Wars.
Switch has sold over 143 million units overall.
Amazing.
They will probably beat their own record, meaning that device will probably become their best-selling console of all time by the time it winds down. So the best one so far is the Nintendo DS, which has sold 154 million units.
Right.
So
No, I
based
think
on
it's-
if they hit their numbers
the
for the year, that's
PS2
really
is like 155 million. Like we are talking about the outer reaches of the most successful video game consoles
Yep.
of all time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the PlayStation 4 was up there, 120 million, something like that. It's somewhere up there.
Yeah.
Even like the worst gen for them to date was the PS3, and I don't remember the exact where it landed, but it was somewhere around 90. I would be shocked
A
if
mere
they.
90. Yes.
Yeah, I would be shocked if they hit that with the
Well, yeah.
PlayStation.
But look, yeah. If you're over 150 million on anything in this scenario, you're magic. Like that's crazy. There's only a handful of devices that made 100.
And let's not forget, Nintendo made the Wii U. So
not everything is perfect.
They're not always perfect. So,
not everything is perfect.
They don't always win.
Yeah, that's fine.
There you go.
Well, and I don't know I don't know how you follow the Switch. I don't know.
You call it the Switch 2.
Yeah.
The Switch Ultra,
the switcheroo,
the Switch 4K.
Switch cash grab.
Well, it's coming out next year. I can't wait. I'll be online to buy it.
I'm curious.
I love my Switch. All right. Well, let's take a little break. And when we come back, we are going to go to the back of the book. That means tips. That means apps. That means brown booze, baby. And a good one, according to Richard this week.
A surprise, a delightful.
It's always a good one, but this one's a delightful surprise.
I've heard of this one. I was looking at the site earlier.
Yeah, no, this one blindsided me. Don't get ahead of
it. Ooh, it's exciting. But first, I want to put in a plug for our great club members, 12,484 strong. Wow, we love you. I know, isn't that on the one hand, we were hoping for maybe 5% of our audience, which would be more than twice that. But that's a lot. 12,000 people is mind-boggling, really.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
It's let's see, we have, I think, 750,000 uniques every month. So, it's a little more than 1% of the total. I would like to see more than 1 in 100 people in the club. Could we make it 2 or 3? I'll tell you the thing. Right now, with the 12,000 members, that pays half our payroll. That's fantastic. Doesn't include any of the other expenses, but it pays half the payroll. People are expensive. They're the most expensive part of any business.
Sure. But they're also what makes things work.
Yeah. I tried it all by myself. Didn't work.
Not the same.
No. So if we doubled that, if we got to 2 or 3%, it would cover our entire payroll. If we got to 5%, we would have so much extra money that I would move to Bermuda. No, I wouldn't. What we would do is we'd expand. We'd pay people more. We'd expand. We'd add shows. So the club to us is really, that's where we can grow. The ad revenue is pretty flat. It's gone down a little bit. It's kind of gone up now, but it's pretty flat. It's just normal. And that covers the other half of the salaries, and didn't cover the studio. That's why we're moving out. I would love to see us be just completely listener supported. We do exactly what you want. We could do a lot more because, there's content that we could make. For instance, me just coming on an hour a day, shooting the breeze, that no advertiser's going to buy. But if the club members wanted it, we could do it. That kind of thing. So that's why we really I don't like begging. I don't want to do pledge breaks and all that. I just want to give you an opportunity to participate if you want. If you like what you hear on this show and the other shows, if you want more of that, if you want to encourage us, it's kind of a way of casting a vote for what we do. Join the club. twit.tv/clubtwit. There are benefits. There are ad-free versions of all the shows. There's additional content. There's video where there isn't video in the public, things like that. But really, it's the feeling that you're supporting something you like and you want to see more of. If that matches, your goals, and you can afford $7 a month, I understand. Believe me, if you're outside the U.S. and it's a hardship, or because of the exchange rates and all that, or if you're inside the U.S. and times are tight, and I know a lot of us that's the case. Fine, that's great, because we still make most of our stuff available for free. But if you can't afford it, I would love it if you would go to twit.tv/clubtwit and join the club. We'd like to have you. The Discord is great. It's a place where club members hang out. I just want to put in a plug for that. Let you know how much it means to us. We're doing our part. We're cutting back. But what we would like to do is do more. So twit.tv/clubtwit. That's all. That's all I have to say. Now to the back of the book and our tip of the week, Mr. Paul Thurrott. And believe it or not, it involves WordStar.
Yep.
That's crazy.
I know it's overdue, frankly, but
it's about time, Paul.
This is the story I've been waiting for.
Yeah. So an award-winning science fiction author who has been using WordStar since the late 1970s and has never stopped using WordStar. And by the way, WordStar for DOS has released a complete archive of this software that includes thousands of pages of documentation, the complete archives of the CompuServe forums for WordStar from back in the day.
What?
His own little custom configurations, the emulators you need to run this thing. And he, like, what's the guy who writes Game of Thrones? R.R. Martin.
Yeah.
Uses WordStar to this day.
That's so fun.
And if you go to this guy's site, it's actually kind
He
of fascinating.
kind of looks like he uses WordStar. He kind of has that I use WordStar kind of look. You know what I'm saying?
You have to be a little bit nuts.
No, he's good. I like his stuff.
This
He's
is
a good writer.
fascinating. Just as a treasure trove of historical, data. I mean, this is amazing. The number of famous authors who have used this over time. Now, granted, most of these guys were back in the day, like Arthur C. Clarke, right? Anne Rice, who obviously today uses a modern computer and Microsoft Word, or actually George R.R. Martin still uses this thing. What's the guy's? Michael Crichton, right? The guy, not Michael Crichton, I'm sorry, different author, but have used this software, and a couple, I guess, still do. So I looked at it today. I got to tell you, it's completely unusable. I have no idea what he's talking about, but he makes an impassioned plea for why this thing is still superior.
My fingers still do Control KS. I mean,
a lot of people's do, yeah.
Yeah, I could see.
So
you have to run in DOS, which means you have to run a DOS emulator.
I use a Markdown editor, so I'm like, I could probably do this, but yeah. I didn't really get into this stuff until WordPerfect, probably 4, maybe 3 point something. But I used Microsoft Word in DOS. Obviously
this thing runs like a hot damn on a Raspberry Pi.
Oh yeah, it does.
Oh, yeah. on anything.
Yeah,
but
on my Apple Watch,
just the keyboard shortcut. The problem with this to me would be the keyboard shortcuts, because A, I never did use this, and B, we're talking now 40-ish years of common keyboard shortcuts that work everywhere, and it's like, I don't know, but you know what? It's fascinating. So definitely
I'd consider it if it ran Emacs keyboard.
Yeah, well, it probably could be configured to do whatever. I'm sure it's highly
file
configurable.
names.
Wow, this is so cool.
3
Crazy
file names.
Yeah, it's really neat. It's worth.
So
just
is it
going to
open
his site and
source? How did he?
No, so this company was split and sold into different. So it's abandonware, which is not like a legal term, but there is no owner of this software. The companies that ended up with some of the assets of some of the companies that used to have something to do with this are companies like some tiny part of Macmillan Publishing, or I can't remember the other company. They don't have any caring or oversight of this. They don't.
WordStar is like a lost chair in a back closet, right? Like it's just an orphan. Nobody knows about it. Nobody
cares. So there is no answer to this. No one. I don't believe. My guess is that nobody owns it actually illegally. It's just been abandoned. So I don't think he has anything to worry about. From that perspective.
What was the name of that book Jeff Jarvis is always recommending? It's a history of word processors. That it talks a lot about WordStar and MicroPro, and
I found it. I couldn't find it now, but I found an old quote from Anne Rice on Facebook, not the one that everyone references, where like, Microsoft Word is a hot mess, whatever. But she was saying this is kind of interesting with any technology. In the late 70s, her friends who are authors would complain to her because she would use a word processor. They couldn't believe it. Yeah. And she said, "You don't understand. This is a direct connection between me and my brain. This is me being the best writer I can be. And if you don't accept that technology can help you be a better writer, then you should not be a writer." Something to that nature. And it was like, nice. Because you could apply that to anything like over the years, right?
Steve Martin, who was a big Windows fan, was telling me that when
That's why he went gray early, by the way.
Yes, I think so. When he wrote The Three Amigos, he wrote it in a word processor, which is very early for Hollywood.
Yeah, right.
And I don't remember if he told me which word processor. I feel like it was WordPerfect.
Probably WordPerfect back then.
But he said he would move a paragraph, and he would have to get up, go have a cup of coffee.
Yeah,
while it was reassembling.
Well, I was lucky he wasn't. I used to try to write in like GeoWrite on a Commodore 64, and you literally had to go. It was like rendering a 3D graphic. Cut and paste was like.
You also got into that reflex save too, because sometimes it would fail.
Yeah, all the time. It's funny though, because it doesn't feel like The Three Amigos is that old of a movie, right? It came out in 86.
but it was.
But in computer terms, 1986 was prehistory.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the day. That's when that movie published. When was he playing with the screenplay? Could have been.
Yeah, he was probably right in the 80s.
Before.
Yeah.
It was definitely DOS. I mean,
it was his first screenplay, I think. So yeah. Great story.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Lucky day.
Is it really the good of all mankind? I don't even know.
It's not for the bad of all mankind.
Yeah.
I love it.
And then just a couple of web browser updates for apps. New Firefox is out. This one, there's several improvements to the reader mode, which I'd say, honestly, awesome. It's really cool. I really like the way Firefox renders text. It's really nice looking. And if you were burned when Arc came out on Windows, that it was not available on Windows 10, it is now. They released a new version, and you can get it.
I try and burn on one of these Win 10 machines.
I love Arc on Mac, but on
Mac
the
it's
same.
It's getting better, but you're right. It's next level on the
This
Mac.
is Arc, but one of the reasons I use it on the shows is because it has no Chrome and has no user interface, so it's great for screenshots,
Mm-hmm.
And then when I want to go back to the show notes, I just I have a little thing over here. I can do that. I love that. I love the clean look, and the little when I open a window. You see, it does this little mini window on top of the window.
I don't know what they call that, but I love that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and you can make it a full screen if you want, but you can also just hit escape. I really like that. Anyway, is it getting more like the Mac version on Windows?
I mean, yeah, sure it is.
I'm sorry.
They are.
What do you use these days as your daily?
So I go back and forth, right? So I've been using Firefox past couple of days because of the new release. I don't know. I'm getting to if you think about it, we've been talking about password managers a lot lately. That's one of the things that kind of helps you not have to use the same browser everywhere, right? So Firefox may not be super great on like iOS or something, but you could just use Safari there. And it was, as long as your stuff can get everywhere, you could actually kind of use the best browser on whatever device you're on, right? It doesn't always have to be the same.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So you just basically didn't answer my question.
I use an extension for the homepage, which is my bookmark. I don't use bookmarks, right? So that's taken care of. And then passwords, obviously the big one, all the autofill stuff. And so what else is there? Just, you sign in, you get your themes and whatever. And
what browser are you looking at right now?
Right now on desktop, I'm using Firefox.
Okay. Interesting. I didn't even know you still use that. Wow.
I go back and forth. I use a lot of different things. So I've been using Safari lately. I've been using the beta version of iPad and iOS 18.1. So, the AI summaries of articles and whatever. And
I kind of need to stay with the same browser only because all the bookmarks and, that's what I use for the shows. So that's why it's Arc now. But, yeah.
No,
and I don't want to use Safari.
Bonjour with 2 U's at the end, the traditionals. If you stutter in French, that's wrong. And but it has multiple pages of links and stuff. It works well for me as for bookmarks or whatever.
Mr. Richard Campbell, you have a fabulous RunAs Radio coming up.
I think we missed. No, you did it. You did ours.
I get it. Yep.
Yeah, published today, episode 944 with Natalie Sarabirakova. We picked this show up while we were together in Oslo at a conference. And we're talking here. She had a great angle on approaching disaster recovery, reducing costs by using cloud. If you were on-prem, just looking at the different models that are available, because A, a lot of that tech's advanced and people don't scrutinize it much. And B, in general, when you walk through your infrastructure in the sense of how you'd recreate it based on the scenario. We talked through scenarios like, I've corrupted a server, or this drive volume's gotten messed up, through to the one I refer to, which was there's a smoking hole in the ground where the office used to be, which happened to me once. And if you think about things a little differently, and just a study of infrastructure often turns up inefficiencies. Like, why are we doing this? Why does that still exist? Those things were supposed to be turned off years ago. So it's one of those maybe quarterly reviews you do, ostensibly to reduce costs. So the CFO loves that you can spend a few days on that, or even bring in a specialist. But in the process, you'll usually come back with some other optimizations that lower that cost and improve overall performance. So it was a strategy for doing the preventative stuff, because when the cloud gets involved, it turns into immediate monthly return.
There you go.
Yeah.
And there's nothing better in the world than an immediate monthly return.
You know, I do this once a year. I do a show that's sort of like my thoughts on what it's going to be like to be a sysadmin this year. And I think a couple
I like
years,
that.
And it's just,
That's good. That's a good idea.
Like, is it ever like a conga line party kind of a situation, or is it usually?
There's a lot of discussion about degrees of suck.
Are you someone who doesn't like to do things proactively? Oh, you're gonna love this job.
What is it going to be like to be a podcaster this year? I might start doing that every. What do you do in December?
Yeah.
You should like start a tweet storm about it.
Yeah,
yeah.
I definitely recommend them snuggle up to their CFO. You know, back when we were really concerned about the downturns, like this is the year to delay replacing hardware, buy the extended warranties, and do the numbers on that. And the number of emails I got back from listeners saying, "Dude, I have lunch with my CFO every other month now." Because for the first time ever, I touched him in a method that made sense to him. I care about how we're spending money. And it's like, now you get to ask for your spend if you produce ROI.
Does he buy lunch though? Because that would kind of put it over the top.
CFOs
your recommendation is to snuggle up to your CFO and touch him in that special place. So.
That's it.
I know.
Okay.
I feel like that's a paraphrasing that perhaps
Did I have to take to HR? Yes, I do. Oh wait, they're closing the office. Who do I bring it to now?
The person in charge. What is it? The people person. What is the new HR term?
Head chief people officer. No, was that
people officer?
What a terrible. Yes. What do you?
C3PO
officer of people. Yeah,
you're making what's that stuff? The science fiction movie where the food's made of people.
Soylent Green.
Soylent Green. I'm like Chief Soylent Green Officer.
There you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think you have sat through this long enough. You deserve.
You're all here for the whiskey. We know.
A fine brown liquor. Oh, so look, I have to enter my birthday.
We have to talk a little bit about how I select whiskeys for this. Sometimes a listener sends me to one or sends me one. Sometimes I get given to me by a friend. Like there's lots of different things. This was not one of these occasions. This is one of these occasions where on Monday I'm like, what am I going to do? I've been home for a while. What am I going to do? Right. And I literally went to my local whiskey store and I looked on the wall and I was thinking American bourbon because I hadn't done a bourbon in a while. So I had time to go. They did some classics, I'd always check which ones I've already done. What have I missed? I should do a Willett or any number of that. Evan Williams. And
Pappy Van Winkle.
I already done.
You did Pappy. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Not that I can find that on a shelf anywhere. And then I also had a hankering for, I've only done a couple of Japanese. Maybe I should do Japanese.
Whistle Pig. Have you done Whistle Pig?
I saw this, and turns out it's both. It's American and Japanese.
Combined.
That's what I was wondering. So this is a partnership.
What the heck? Yeah, well, it's by partnership, I mean an ownership, right? Like to be clear.
Yes. Well, in the Microsoft sense of partnership. Yeah.
You would partner now. What's interesting about this is that it is a collab. Jim Beam, yes, owned by Suntory, but it is a collaboration between Jim Beam and Suntory. Now, obviously, I'll do a quick run down on the two companies. Suntory, we've talked about a number of times now from the original Japanese whiskey show way back when. That this is Shinjiro Tori, who first started selling imported wine in 1899, and then there's Masaka Takasuru, who was the serious whiskey guy who had been trained in Scotland, and so they collaborated, built the first Scottish style whiskey distillery in Japan, the Yamazaki distillery in 1923. Took him a few years to make a whiskey. It was terrible. Takasuru, went back to Scotland, did everything he could to try and make it better. Finally got frustrated with Torii and left in 1934, went and made his own distillery, the Nikkei distillery, which is up in Hokkaido in the northern part because it was more like Scotland. Meantime, Shinjiro Tori continued on. In 1937, he finally got a hit with his Suntory whiskey, which the Japanese soldiers really liked. Fast forward over the good years and bad years of whiskey. And of course, we all hear about Suntory with 2003 when Lost in Translation comes out, right? Make it Suntory time. And also the same year that the Yamazaki 12 was the very first Japanese whiskey to ever win an international contest. They got the gold medal. That transformed Suntory. I've never really dug into this part because by 2009, Suntory is now reorganized into this monster multi-entity. There's the holding company, the beverage and food company. There's a thing called Products Limited. There's wellness. There's liquors. There's beer and spirits. There's the Wine International Group. And they start buying entities, lots of different companies, to the point that by the time they acquire Beam in 2014, they're the third largest producer of distilled beverages after Diageo and Pernod Ricard. Now, if you go to the Beam story, which I've never talked about before, because we generally don't talk about Beam whiskeys, for better or worse, and there's a ton of them, today, besides Jim Beam, that's also Basil Hayden and Knob Creek and Bookers and Bakers and Little Book and Old Tub and Old Crow and Old Granddad and Old Overholt, whatever that is. And Hardin Creek, like they own a lot of whiskeys, some of them which they made and some of which they acquired. The company goes all the way back to a man named James Beam selling whiskey in 1795. The company's officially called the James Beam Distilling Company in 1935. Although they ultimately sell it to a guy named Harry Blum, who's a spirit merchant out of Chicago. And then it becomes that horrible story about products where it just shifts from one brand company to another all through the 60s and 70s. One of them was American Brands, which was originally a tobacco company, but it was also in insurance and golf and home hardware. And while they're under that banner, in 85, American Brands bought National Distillers, which is where Old Crow comes from, and they become the Jim Beam Brands Company. So they're now going down that horrible path as well, until the parent company, American Brands, becomes Fortune Brands, because that's not weird or creepy at all, and buys 20 more whiskey-related brands from Allied Dominique in 2005. And this is when they ended up with many Scottish distilleries and others as well. And so by that point, it's now called Beam Global Spirits and Wine. It's 2006, which they actually split off from Fortune Brands to become a separately publicly traded company, because I guess they decided they needed more money. But at the moment they were public, they were a candidate for acquisition. And by 2014, that's Suntory. So Suntory ends up owning it and renames Suntory to Beam Suntory, largely because they were concerned that Suntory was not well known in the US market, but Jim Beam is. And so the name was really important. So they thought. They don't think that anymore. As of May of this year, this parent company is now called Suntory Global Spirits. So there's the origin of the two companies that collaborate over this whiskey, even though they've basically been the same company for 10 plus years. But, Suntory being one of the good guys, I think, like Diageo, where they've really done a lot of work to protect brands and arguably enhance those brands. Suntory is also the guys who facilitated Maker's Mark making their cellar editions, some very good whiskey they wouldn't have been able to make without the money available to them that Suntory has to be able to expand which otherwise was a very small operation. So the actual collaboration part of this whiskey is between two people, Fred No and Shinju Fukio. So Fred No is a 7th generation master distiller. He is literally the great grandson of Jim Beam. So this is the family heritage of Jim Beam, which is still involved. And the core of this whiskey is a Jim Beam mash bill. So 76% corn, 12% rye, 10% barley. And then it goes into American oak for 5 years, which is super normal. That, to me, is an American bourbon, right? Except it's not. Because after that, they take a portion of the batch and they put it into Californian red wine oak casks for about a year. And another portion goes into sherry casks for a couple of years. And then the separate, what they call parcels, these products, are blended by Shinji. So Fred No is responsible for making the bourbon and setting up the barrelings. And then all of those parcels of the product in different barrels goes over to Shinji, who is only the 5th ever blender for Suntory. And remember, the Suntory made their money on blended whiskey. Their single malts are an anomaly, but their famous yellow label Suntory whiskey, it's always been a blend. Their blends have always been their business. The challenge here is that Japanese whiskey has always been made in the Scottish style. They only work in barley. So for Shinji, this is kind of a shock. Here you have this mash bill concept as well as this array of barrels. So he's trying to assemble different flavors together and does this unique blending. And they did the first version of this back in 2019. So it's been around a few years. I just finally ran into it. The crazy part is, what do you even call this? because it breaks the rules for American bourbon and it breaks the rules for Japanese whiskey. Nominally, it is an American blended whiskey, but that has a very bad reputation. Like, generally speaking, blended whiskeys are frowned on in the American market. They don't mind buying a Scottish blended whiskey like a Chivas or a Famous Grouse. And they certainly don't mind buying Japanese whiskeys that way. But when it comes to American, that's kind of a problem. Although I would point out that Jim Beam makes a blended whiskey too called Little Book. And coincidentally, the master distiller in charge of Little Book is Fred No's son, Freddie. So all in the family. On the other hand, and the other part about this is, okay, so I like a blend because somebody did this intentionally. They put the pieces together. They were looking for a flavor profile. Shinji goes into the idea of like the fruitiness I find too sweet when it's just bourbon, too much caramel. I want a little more fruit. I want a little more tannins. And so he gets that from the wine and from the sherry. But the other part is they don't do chill filtration and they don't do coloring. So one of the complaints from some of the reviewers is that depending on the bottle of this you buy, different colors, different shades, because not every barrel behaves the same way. And they're not trying to compensate for that. They're focused on a consistent flavor and they get it. Well, as far as I know, I've only had one bottle of this so far. So up front of the nose, this is only 47%. So not a lot of burn, but it's not pathetic either. Like, you definitely know there's alcohol in there. It's got that burnt caramel, butterscotch kind of, I think I'm drinking bourbon. Like, here it comes. And then a weird fruit note hits you. Like, that's not what happens with bourbon normally. This is much more like a ported scotch. Like, that's strange. But then it's got a sort of tightness coming off your mouth after that. More of the leather and the smoky. Not there's any peat in this, and lots of warming. So good evening drink, although I'm drinking in the afternoon, but I drink in the afternoon every Wednesday. What's brilliant about it? $44 from Total Wine. You know, because it's not a single malt, because they're not being pretentious about it. What they did was they made the best whiskey they could using a different set of skills and a sort of typical production. So it's reasonably priced for an unusual whiskey without being awful, right? When we talked about JD, I'm like, I'm impressed with how good JD is for a $20 bottle of wine. But
I'm looking for a whiskey that's not awful. That seems like
I care less, honestly.
Yeah. But
about awfulness or about leather off your mouth?
About awfulness.
But, you know, a couple of the themes that have come out with doing this on a routine basis is like, I'm learning not to hate the conglomerates because they seem to be doing good things.
Yeah.
And I'm learning to resist not that I've ever, people consider me pretentious about whiskey just because I'm knowledgeable. Although whenever I ask me what my favorite is, it's like the one sitting in front of me. I'm not that idealistic.
I like that. That's a good motto.
Yeah. I got a little Glengarry in the decanter behind me, and it's still fantastic. We talked about it a while ago, and I put it in the decanter. Yeah. This is a big, rich, jammy. It's a surprise. You don't expect this much from a $44 bottle of American bourbon that even can't be called American bourbon. Even though it says on the label here, Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, partially finished in wine and sherry cask. So they're being honest. But not according to the FDA rules, it's not really a bourbon, right?
Right.
So they've definitely tinkered with it, but they've tinkered with it in a lovely way.
Legent with a T at the end.
Apparently, it's Legent.
Legent.
I had to look it up.
Names are Legent.
Yes.
Well, once again, I'm at work and I'm drinking.
It must be Wednesday.
That's a good job.
It
must be Wednesday.
Sometimes that becomes my whole afternoon.
That's Richard Campbell. He is runasradio.com and .net Rocks. Also at runasradio.com. Always a pleasure. Our whiskey expert, an aficionado, but not snob. And I like that. Paul Thurrott, he's a snob, and he admits it. Yes.
Jerk.
He's at thurrott.com, THURRO good.com. Make sure you become a premium member Kevin, you've got to pay for your premium membership and log in so that you get all the special goodness, all the best stuff from Thurrott.com. And also his books, Join the Crowd Where the Love of Tech is Real. Did you make that up, Paul?
It's a great line. I love it.
That's a pre-me owning the business tagline that you just reminded me I should probably update. But I mean, I'm sure I okayed it.
Yeah.
They must
love
ask
tech,
me
but
at
it makes
some
me
point.
angry.
At some point, you just kind of said, we're just going to listen to what the marketing people say for a little while.
We, when I was at Ziff Davis Television, later Tech TV, Ziff Davis's slogan was "Believe in technology,"
Nice.
which I always thought maybe was a little too,
Was there a cross and then
And maybe
like,
it'll
yeah,
come
exactly.
true, right?
a little too uncritical. So we
Put your
always,
faith.
at the end of every screensavers, for
not in
several
your
years,
God,
Kate and I
but
would
in
always
our
end,
God.
believe in technology, but back up your hard drive and things like
Nice.
that, which I thought was kind of a nice way of spinning it.
Yeah.
Anyway, the tech love is real at Thurrott.com. You can also get his books, Windows Everywhere, which is a really cool history of Windows through its programming languages and models. And then, of course, the field guide to Windows 11 with Windows 10 built in at leanpub.com. Choose your own price. And, of course, Paul and Richard and I gather together every Wednesday to do the show 11 a.m. Pacific. That's 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1800 UTC. And there are now not one, not two, but 7, count them, ways you can watch us do the show live at that hour. And I mentioned them all earlier, and I'm not going to do it all again. But if you're in the club, of course, you get a special access permit at our Discord. After the fact, on-demand versions of the show, with or without ads, depending on your club status. Available at twit.tv/dubdub. There's the webpage. You'll see also a link on the webpage to the YouTube channel for Windows Weekly and to a couple of podcast players. But any podcast player, you can subscribe and get the show automatically when it's available. As soon as Kevin finishes polishing up this masterpiece. Right, Kevin?
By the way, they make a Windows Weekly whiskey playlist.
What?
Yeah.
Did you do that, Kevin? You did that
Yeah,
on
he
YouTube,
did.
right? Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
It's Chris.
I'm a
When
little
you said that,
behind.
Oh, no,
I thought you meant music. I was like, what music to listen to Windows Weekly by and get drunk?
But originally we talked about just doing that Scottish whiskey series, right? The 8 parts.
But it's
But
also good.
He's kept going.
We can't stop.
Clonakilty one just got published, and I went back and watched it because I was with you, Leo.
Love that Clonakilty. You were right here.
And we left Paul completely out of the conversation. It was fantastic, really.
So good.
I have a slightly different memory of that day.
I have no memory of that day, so you got me
We
beat.
got into the Clonakilty, I'm afraid, in a very good way.
Yeah,
but you had to
it
go on
was
and
really
work
good.
more that day.
I did.
felt for you, man.
Yeah. So we do, this is it. The last chance to
Wow.
rape and pillage, I guess. People have been coming in and taking stuff, and I've been
Nice.
getting emails. What are you going to do with that the desk
If
there behind
if
you
this is
there?
done correctly, when we come back next week, it's going to look pretty much the same.
No.
Yeah.
Well, yes, in the sense that you guys will look exactly the same,
Right.
and I will be in the middle here, but my backdrop will not be the same.
Oh,
That's
will
You
be
do a new
different. Oh, I
backdrop,
see.
so you're innovating.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I'm sure a
It's
few
pretty
more
similar.
pieces will have fallen out of R2 for Paul. And
Exactly.
I still have an empty shelf or two here. I got to put stuff.
Yeah.
I don't feel good about R2.
I'm feeling like I need to buy a bigger R2D2 and put it on my shelf.
basically, Richard, I'm doing a shelf behind me with the TWiT logo and a bunch of podcast awards. That's about it.
Fine.
It's fun. I'll do at some point, I'll do a tour of what we're doing because we kind of overbuilt it. Not that we've never done that before,
No,
but
I can't imagine. No.
It's me all by myself in the attic, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cameras.
Wow.
Wow.
Are you able to control them? Like, do you have an A10
Yeah.
or something?
So there's a single, there's a 2-shot, there's a camera if a guest is with me.
Mm-hmm.
There is an over the top shot so I can show you stuff on the desk. That's got a dedicated camera. There is a GoPro behind me, so you get the big picture. And I'm taking home a PTZ. I mean, we have all these cameras, so I'm taking home a PTZ so that I can, zoom in and out and all that stuff. So
I tried to add a second webcam to one episode of Hands on Windows, and the entire thing melted down. I was like under the table in a fetal position.
I keep my view cam around for you all the time, man.
I love your view cam.
Yeah.
If I had a view, I'd have a view cam. I don't have a view. I'm in an attic. See, if I had that view, I don't think I'd be doing the show. But
you're going to be on like Ghost Hunters. One day you're going to be doing the show and some weird shape's going to go by in the background.
Dude, it happens all the time. It's usually humpbacks.
I'd be out there in a canoe if I were
in the attic. like a ghost.
Oh, in the attic. God knows what kind of things you're going to see.
Yeah, goodness knows.
It's an interesting space.
I always meant to rig up my old office with a camera for the dog, just so you could always get cut to a
Jason Snell has a dog cam.
Yeah.
He has a dog sitting in a bed.
The dog
I have a balcony cam in Mexico. Does that count?
Yeah.
That's all I got.
So you could have the balcony cam.
Yeah.
It's fun. I mean, I have a 8-port switcher.
Yeah. You might as well take advantage of it. You really should put a cam out there because it could also be a riot cam for you too, Paul. Like once in a while you have the parade.
Everyone, or at least those parades that go by in the early hours of the morning.
Our neighbor texted us a video, 2:00 in the morning. Exact same thing happened.
Another parade?
Yes, they do it once a year, I guess.
There you go.
The theory is it is police cadets.
Yeah.
Marching from the school to the station
to take over the.
It could be a running shootout between drug dealers and stuff, but it's a parade.
No, there's music. It's really cool. So that it happened again, but it happens in the wee hours of the morning.
It's like 2:30 in the morning.
That's because the only time it's cool there.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
No,
maybe that's it. So, Paul, you're going to stay in Macungie for next week?
I will be here next week, yes.
Okay. And Richard, you're going to stay in Madeira Park for next week? Okay.
2 more weeks here and then Copenhagen.
Oh, I got to get going.
Oh, we'll let you go. That's it for the show. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time right here on Windows Weekly. Bye.